Does anybody else wish to speak on the consent calendar items, or item?
No, that was the only
Okay.
item.
So with the correction being made, could I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
I'll second that.
All approve, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, tonight we have no public hearings, and items tonight, the items on the public meeting items are mainly discussion items. I don't think we'll be making decisions, maybe just giving directions. There are 5 items, well, technically 6, but they have the review projects. So let's get right into the first public meeting item, update of airport area rezoning project.
Yes, Chairman Creighton, members of the commission, this is a public discussion item. The commissioners may recall that you have given direction to the staff to move forward on rezoning a number of properties, so we're simply here to update you on this. This is, of course, the airport area. It really began when we had Leyland Krell, who is one of our primary developers in the cannabis industry, buy all those properties that you see in the dark red, or buy or have an option to buy them. And he came to the staff and asked about rezoning this. And the staff's reaction was that this really would not fly because it would smack of what's called spot zoning. It would not make sense, in our opinion, to rezone some properties M1 and keep others C2 in this manner. But we recalled that there is an interest in the city of California City to move forward with facilitating the cannabis industry. And while we have had some rezonings, the staff is of the opinion that this area was identified earlier by the Planning Commission as a possible area for rezoning, to have what we call city-initiated rezoning. In fact, this area did have a couple of rezonings already last December, where property was rezoned from C2 to M1. Should point out also that this is all currently vacant, which is rather unique, all of this property zoned C2. So here it is again, area, we call it the airport area, rezoning area, and we have a total of 138 parcels. Many of them are quite small. The acreage is just about 46 acres in all. And want to point out that there is a portion of this area we would like to rezone that's currently zoned R. Everything else is zoned C2. In the area that's zoned R, and again, it's also vacant. We would be doing this because, as you're all aware, the M district for cannabis does, or the cannabis ordinance requires that there be a 200-foot buffer. So this would accomplish the buffer. So that portion south of Lindbergh would be identified as being appropriate for, we believe, C. And we can see a lot of cannabis-related businesses springing up in this area. So again, here's the airport area. You can see it's all vacant present time. There was some question about whether or not the lots are large enough to facilitate cannabis industry, and we had a couple of conceptual site plans on some of the smaller lots. This is one of the ones that you approved rezoning in December. And here's another one. Actually, this one they'd be proposing to subdivide this into 4 parcels from its current 1 parcel. So again, the staff would like to point out that because this is a major undertaking, we're going to be relying on assistance from Michael Baker International. John Bellis is here tonight, as is Jeffrey Graham from Michael Baker International. They'll be helping us with this major rezoning project. And that would conclude our comments. We'd be very pleased to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
All right, so the way this will work, and we'll do the same thing for all of the discussion items tonight, after staff has given us a rundown of what's going on, we'll do some commissioner questions, and then we'll open up to the public, and then we'll bring it back up to the dais for any direction that may need to be given to staff. So, commissioners, any questions on this item? Anybody? Jump in.
Okay. I have a few questions. I'm glad that you went over those graphs and the maps because in the packet, it doesn't show the lower ones being rezoned, so that answers my question regarding that.
It does.
It does?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well,
Rickenbacker and Icarus, it showed as part of the rezoning project, but that's going to be gone to C2, so, but it doesn't specifically say.
In fairness, we
Okay.
had two maps, and one
Yeah,
of the
it
maps
doesn't
did,
specifically
the
say
other one
R1 to C2. My bad, sorry.
The other question I had was, I see this on the list of the items that are being done, that's going to be, we're discussing that tonight. Is the meeting going to make a decision on this today, or are we just bringing this up for discussion?
This is just an update. And,
Okay.
you know, if all goes well, you're correct, the next item on the agenda is a discussion about the schedule for how we would propose moving forward with this rezoning project.
Okay.
Would be with Mr. Baker.
Yes, well,
Or
Mr.
that
Baker
mo-
is here
just
for comments.
address.
And Mr. Baker is actually, his primary responsibility tonight is to talk on item number 3, which will be about the CEQA process that we're currently engaged in.
Okay. And then the other question I had have we addressed at all how, since this is city initiated, have we addressed at all how we're going to recover some of the costs?
We've talked with Mr. Krell about assisting us, and we haven't ironed anything down as yet, but Mr. Krell offered to participate in some of the costs to make this all happen. We've talked about possibly on the other side, not charging any of the property owners for the rezoning, including Mr. Krell, but adding a surcharge for the site plan. So just adding a small amount for each site plan that will come in under this. Because bear in mind, we're looking at 138 parcels of land. And so if they all were to move forward, that certainly is going to bring a lot of, positive aspects to on behalf of the cannabis industry, but it also could be very lucrative from the city's standpoint as well.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Do we have a consensus of some of the owners, how far we may have to chase most of these people?
Well,
I mean, do we have a,
yeah, you bring up an interesting point. We had another area that we thought would make sense for a city-initiated rezoning. On 2 occasions, we sent out letters, and I believe there was about maybe 26 property owners in that particular study area, and we heard back from 2. So we were pretty discouraged. So in this particular case, the thinking is simply this, that the property is currently zoned C2 commercial. It's not a whole lot different. It's a lot different when you talk about you can't do cannabis in the C2. But in terms of it's currently been zoned as commercial, nothing has happened since the birth of the city in this area. And so our thinking is that we want to believe the property owners will be supportive. We plan to get something out to them in the next couple of weeks. But to answer your question directly, we have not sought permission because, quite frankly, the city does not need permission to rezone property. And personally, I'd be very surprised if any of the property owners would object, but we will see. But if somebody does object, you still have to consider the greater good of the community versus individual. But we'll see what happens.
but to deter that, they'd have to put something in writing, come in, do their thing?
Yes, and of course, they'd be welcome to come to any of the public hearing and if they wanted to protest. But the staff just doesn't believe there's going to be a lot of dissension or discord as a result of this. And if Mr. Krell keeps up with his acquisition program, it'll be a moot point anyway.
Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did. That's rare. Anybody else have any questions before I jump in? All right, I have a couple of questions. Okay, under Planning Commission items, staff report, item 3, city to send out 300-foot notices. Are you sending out 41,400 notices? Because if you send out one, if you, oh, I'm sorry, maybe, oh, no, never mind, my math is off. But you're going to have to send out several hundred, I mean, a lot of notices. That's going to hit the city in the pocketbook for just postage alone.
Yeah, and most of them will be covered within the study area itself.
right.
And if you draw a
You say
perimeter
300?
around,
300 foot. I used it as 300 items in my, I'm not even here tonight.
No.
Okay, next question I have, there's something with your timeline. You got a, under Planning Commission staff report, item 8, you say you got distribute staff report August 29th for the Planning Commission meeting on September 3rd. And under the Planning Commission resolution, item 6, you've got distribute resolution with staff report August 28th. The dates don't coincide.
okay.
I'm nitpicking here. That's just what I do.
May we move on to the next item, because I believe that's where specifically we came up with the overview.
You have an overview? That's not on here?
And,
Yeah,
okay, so we have this, and we can go through this. The-
sure.
Tribal.
The first step, of course, is this is something new to California City, and Senate Bill 18 requires us to notify Indian tribes. MBI has actually done our work for us. They contacted the Indian Council, and we've been given 5 tribes that will be impacted or may be impacted by what happens in Cal City. And so we sent letters last week advising them of our interest in amending the general plan. So that pretty much is the first step, and that's already been accomplished.
That's new to me.
They have 90 days. Second step would culminate in a planning commission meeting on September 3rd, and these are just all of the steps involved. The city will do most of the public hearing notification. We're going to send out letters to all the property owners, of course. We also are going to be receiving assistance from Michael Baker International to address the city permits and submit revised draft staff report to the city by August 26th. So
So during the Planning Commission meeting on September 3rd, we will be reviewing all of this, all this stuff here in those steps 1 through 8?
Well,
Pretty much.
hopefully on the 3rd, we might have some preliminary background information, but the public hearing is being proposed to be on September 3rd, and hopefully, it may be a long night, but hopefully you will be able to make a decision on September 3rd.
We've had one of those.
So the intent is that we'd be asking you for a recommendation to the city council on all the rezoning and the general plan amendments. And I believe your original comment, I think we caught that, because didn't we have October 3rd? Yeah. But we're looking at actually assuming there's a recommendation from the Planning Commission on September 3rd, we're looking at repeating that same process again, only this time sending out notices on behalf of the City Council public hearing for both general plan amendment and rezoning. And that we're looking at to be held on October 8th.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop at this time. I'm going to open it up to public comment if anybody would like to speak on this.
Test. Okay. So we've represented several properties in the immediate vicinity. The history here is I wasn't a big fan of this in the beginning. I'm more open-minded now after talking to the proponent as well as Commissioner Creighton. A lot of folks have put a lot of resources into these business parks, and this kind of competes with that a little bit. And maybe that's where my concern was. But listening to the proponent, there is some opportunity here to market the proximity to utilities as well as the possibility for the smaller facilities, the non-cultivation facilities. And some of those are really capable of generating some real revenue to the business owner, which results in cannabis business tax. So from an economic perspective, you could make a strong argument that this is to the advantage of the city. If you're really pushing for public safety and sustainability, you have to do what it takes to get there. You can't just talk a talk. And so this, in a sense, is an aggressive move. It's eliminating the idea of a spot zone. You're going with a, side-by-side properties in an area or a zone, if you will. It's contiguous to the airport. It's contiguous to where there's power coming in. Leland will tell you, I believe there's water lines in all the streets. Many of those properties were surveyed in the 60s. And so even though those monuments may not be found, it is an existing tract. And for all those reasons, it's worthy of your consideration. For folks that don't own property there, it might be a tough pill to swallow. That they've spent a lot of money nearby. But I'm not sure that's what the city's problem is. I think the city's problem is to do what's best for the city. And in particular, forward land planning requires you to make the best decisions that will cause the city to be conforming, to be an attractive city, not to have nuisances, and to create a sustainable revenue source. That's incumbent upon the city. So for those reasons, I think it's worth consideration. There's been a couple other suggestions to the south of Lindbergh that I think are reasonable also. Having 40,000 residential lots in the city has not necessarily been to our advantage. And so having half of a street to the south change from R1, which are really tight lots, to C2 on the surface looks pretty good. Those are pretty tiny lots. And so I'm not sure how viable those are, but I will make this suggestion to you. Carry that design to the west, across the multifamily, and pick up at least one or two of those lots, and to the east. Then you have an opportunity for a non-cannabis, a non-industrial use that could be a commercial use with a property that has sufficient area to actually do something. Because those tiny little lots, I'm not sure, are really going to be suitable to anything. other than a tiny home or a smaller home. And so that would be something I think that is also worthy of consideration. But I think you're headed in the right track. I'm very interested to see how this comes forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
One moment. Could you tell me, show me the spots you were talking about, the east and west?
So this is currently C2. You're considering M1.
Right.
You have pushed across here in the R1. My suggestion is pick up 2 lots or even 1 lot here. Sean should verify this. I believe these are 101 feet wide and 286 feet long. And so as a result, when you talk about a mailing area, that's just 2 lots or 3 lots. So you're going to pick up maybe 6 lots here in your mailing area. You know, you'll pick up 10 or 12 more that way, but just carry this straight across. Bump it down in here or carry it straight across here. Then we can actually have a really suitable commercial corner here that can serve this area. Whereas you're competing with cannabis up here for a commercial use. And I think it would be desirable to have some limited commercial, particularly on these corners. Could be a real opportunity. And there are utilities there. So it's not like you're out in the boonies. I mean, this area has, you know, in fact, if you go out there already, there's already power through this tract. Nothing built there yet. There are a couple of homes down here. Nothing built here. This has utilities. It has sewer, water, and power. So this possibly going to commercial could be usable.
And you're talking about the east side also.
Same thing on the other
Right.
side.
Okay.
That helps you with your setbacks. It helps you with some functional use there as well.
Those are 0.67 acre lots.
0.67?
Yes.
All right.
I can't get the dimensions right now, but I can tell you the acreage.
101 by 286.
So you don't want-
Anybody else like to speak on this?
Race, I'm sorry, Race 80. I agree with the staff, and I'd like to mention a couple points. Number one is the affordability of small lot, as was mentioned before. Even though it's a small lot, however, it could be suitable for cannabis in a small size, or it could be adjoining the adjacent lots and make it a little bit larger, which happen all the time, is already happened in 2 or 3 places. The second item is the availability of utilities, which is so crucial to developing any property. There are a lot of lots in city of California City. There are a lot of M1. However, the lack of utility make them a little bit harder, maybe down the road the next few years. In this particular case, I checked, and there is a sewer on Lindenberg. There is a underground utility on Lee Street. There is water all over, and there is even gas. So the availability of utility is a real plus. And finally, I agree with the staff that this zone change go along with simultaneous general plan amendment in order to facilitate and expedite this process of zone change on that particular area. I agree with the previous speaker as far as the changing the zone of 1 or 2 property on 2 sides, east and west. However, there's one planning glitch. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll just mention here that right between the R1 zone or RM with the proposed C2, there must be a buffer, and like alley, that's right, like alley or something, and I don't see it any. If planning finds some kind of buffer, then that would accommodate what the previous speaker mentioned. And at this time, I really don't see any buffer or anything, so that's my only concern. However, I understand that there should be some buffer between the M1 and the commercial, which is already indicated over there, and it could be continuously, going all the way west and south. That's right. However, that buffer zone between the residential and commercial is the one something
I
that I'm
I
concerned.
don't believe we're required a buffer between C2 and RM1
Okay,
or
that's
2.
great then, because,
Yeah,
okay, that's
exactly.
great. Because,
So, yeah, but yes,
yes,
go ahead.
because some cities require that, and I wasn't aware that in this. Okay, that's great.
We do have a requirement for residential and cannabis development.
yeah, but C2 wouldn't be cannabis.
Correct. And that's what would be used as the buffer between residential and manufacturing.
Yeah, then in that case, I completely agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Karen Mess. I'm seeing something different, and so I have a couple of questions. This is 46 acres, 138 parcels. Potentially, we have fewer owners than 138 different owners at this point. And if we look at this beyond just cannabis, have we got a pilot project potential here that we're looking at how to put something together that's bigger, that could draw in business or some kind of commercial industry? Because we hear our residents all the time saying, I want an Albertsons or I want a Walmart or whatever, and one of the big problems has always been the small lots with all the scattered owners. So maybe this is a learning exercise to find out what it takes to do it in an area where we do have utilities, because we don't know who's out there that might be attracted to us in our city if some of these small parcel obstacles are removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, staff, do we want to continue on with the rest of this? And then if we have questions going on there? We're not done with this particular item yet, correct? Or are we?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, all right, then we'll bring it back up here for any comments by the commissioners. Anybody?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I am in agreement with those corners. I think that we do need to look at that. Just to completely fill up that whole,
Straight across.
street all the way across. And then that would be maybe even a better buffer when you're looking across M1 on those corners too. So those are just my thoughts.
Anybody else? I do agree with staff and the comments and DJ's comments around point about taking at least 4 of those properties on the east and west, as long as we have the minimum 200-foot buffer. I agree. So this will be put on hold until we have some information back, which by your planning, we should be somewhere mid-August. We should be seeing something on paper?
Yes.
Okay.
And the only other comment the staff would have is we did point out in the staff reports that we were operating under the assumption that California City we could have 4 general plan amendments per year.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we found out that our own ordinance limits us to 3. Nobody can seem to tell us why, where this came from, what the advantage was. But in order to move forward, so we can move forward not only with the rezoning for the airport area, but some of these others that are in the pipeline already, if we don't want to have to wait until January to go to the city council, we're recommending that soon we have a planning commission public hearing to consider amending the municipal code to allow us to have 4 general plan amendments a year.
Right. It's on our agenda to discuss, yeah.
Now, if we were to, where we're talking the east and west and then bottom lots, adding them, would we need some work to be done to include them now? If we wanted to bring them into the picture too, as you send all these notices?
Yes, yeah, if that would be the consensus of the planning commission, we will do that. We will just amend the study area to include, do you want to show us, Sean, the laser?
Them
It-
4
I
lots
mean,
on
at the
each
very
side?
least, we're talking about 2 more lots.
4 technically.
Yeah, 4 on each
Two on each
side.
side.
No, 2 on each side. That is,
Just
as
the
a
2?
minimum, 2 on each side. Because because you've got Lindbergh as the part of your buffer.
Well, I'm just saying, because he said they're 100-foot wide, right?
And then you've got Lindbergh and you got easements on either side of Lindbergh.
But with 100 feet, if you have a
We'll get it
business,
worked out.
if you were having 100 feet for a business, if you wanted to do a commercial, if you wanted to get a commercial property in them corners, I would think you'd have to go too deep
Yeah.
Yeah.
versus just the one, because 100 foot kind of limits you on the kind of, any kind of storefront, even if it's an eatery, you're not going to have the space in 100-foot width. The narrow, the 200 allows you to put a decent size. If you wanted to put another McDonald's in that area, just to say you would be allowed to, you'd have the room to do that type of business versus just 100. They're a little longer, but the width kills them. So,
I agree. I think
my,
we're-
for myself, I'd prefer to see 2 deep, the 4 on both sides to utilize that. That'll allow a pretty nice, at some point, we could see a pretty good sized building or some development. It would give them a little bit of leeway if we ever expand all this area out in the airport. If we can attract more businesses out to that way. Because if we're going to have all these cannabis businesses, I can see some other businesses sprouting out there, some restaurants.
Okay, so would it be the consensus of the commission to include 8 additional parcels? 4 on the east and 4 on the west?
I agree with that.
Commissioner Macedonio?
Yep.
Okay, consensus, go with 8.
Great. And while we're at it, we just have one more item to add, and that is that there's a very elongated T, this parcel right here, that's zoned R1 residential. It's vacant, of course. We're only speculating, but the staff believes that at the time the city was laid out, that this was set up to be a open space buffer. It just looks a taxiway. Perfect.
There's tie downs at the end of those cul-de-sacs.
Wow.
It's also a drainage area.
There is an old agricultural canal through there.
There is. You drive down each of those cul-de-sacs, you see a tie down.
Yeah, right. So,
Where Rickenbacker is? Where Rickenbacker Court is?
Track map, the original
Yeah.
track map cover, I believe it has some descriptive information.
so here's the planning commissioner's dilemma. We might as well put this on the table and hopefully get some consensus tonight. If we're going to follow with the concept that having commercial is a nice buffer to this M, we should probably do something about this unique T-shaped parcel. And typically it's, I don't know if you'd call it a cardinal sin, but it's typically a planning sin to split a assessor parcel with zoning. In other words, it should all be one or another, although we have a couple of situations in Cal City where the zoning is split. But in this particular case, we would recommend, and DJ, you have a lot of thoughts on this, we would recommend just splitting it here.
It may be an easement, so it cover the track map.
So you don't think it belongs to anyone in particular?
I'll get you the track map
Okay.
It belongs to a trust under the assessor info, yeah.
So it's probably sold inappropriately, but that's our fear, yeah.
I'm not getting it.
I understand what they want to do. You see where the blue line is
Right.
across Rickenbacker
Right.
and Icarus? They
Okay.
want to go from there north, and then just the little slivers above, that's all still R1. So they want to include that in the C2.
Correct.
But if that T, the entire T is owned by one person, you're going to split that person's property with zoning.
But the other alternative would be have the commercial
How
zone
far
go all
down
the way
does that T go? How far south?
And how wide is it?
So it,
That's irrelevant. It's pretty long. Let me pull it up.
yeah, it takes up the whole tract. Basically, it's a big plus, if you notice. And it
And-
looks like it was supposed to be some type of
This is
open
just gonna,
space
this
or
is just
some
going to cascade all
preservation.
the way down.
Exactly.
And I don't want that to happen.
And how wide is it? Across there?
I'd guess 150, 200 feet. If they were going to taxi small aircraft on it, probably at least 150, 200 feet.
Yeah, it'd have to be pretty wide.
I have a suggestion.
We're really not doing this to the public, but go ahead.
No, it just out of, we can make portion of that lot commercial. We don't, I mean, you don't have to make the whole lot as a commercial.
I agree with you, but they just said it's a cardinal sin to split the lot and make it partial, part of it commercial and part of it residential if it's only single owner.
Problem is that as soon as you want to split a lot, then you need the consent of the owner. And if the owner said, no, I don't want to split it, then we go back to square one. But in this case, if you said that, no, we want to just change the zone of that portion, let's say 100 feet, then it's okay. No issue with that.
Thank you.
No, I mean,
Question for you, staff. Does that, the slivers up the top, does that affect the 200-foot buffer? I assume it does.
Yes.
Just pull the damn mic over to you.
So if you, the way the ordinance is written is, it says that you can't have a cannabis development structure within
Right,
200 feet.
correct.
So, yeah, you're ultimately,
Do we know the dimensions of the sliver? Not the part that's going north-south, the part that's running east-west. Do we know the dimensions of that?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Obviously, you can't build in it.
Correct.
I-
That's why I didn't want to grab it.
I think we probably need to do some research on that before we.
Yeah, I
discuss
agree.
this
I
any
agree.
further.
Gonna have to dig in the map, see what that is a little bit. A little more detail.
Why don't you look into something, look into pros and cons of doing both ways, splitting
Sure.
it and then looking into the whole thing.
And,
It's just, this is going to become,
Is it owned by one
Avalanche.
person?
I don't know.
it's
So
owned by a
that's-
trust.
You gotta figure
You
that
gotta
out
assume
first,
it is.
right?
Mhm.
If it's more than one person, then you gotta think a little hard and strong about it.
Staff, yeah, do some research on this and let us know what's going on.
Yes, sir. Another option would be, since you added a few more parcels, which makes a lot of sense to make them commercial, we could do this entire area commercial, because it's all vacant right now.
You're talking all the way down the next two courts?
Well, at least to just about where the map ends on the screen. Well, I'm talking
Excuse
about
me.
these parcels too. Make
And,
everything commercial.
yeah, we might need a little more info. I mean, and actually find out what the intent was to begin and, so it's kind of hard to go in a different direction if they thought that was gonna be drainage ditches, now they wanna,
Well, DJ, if this was going to be a taxiway, I presume this was going to be a subdivision where you could keep your private plane tied down?
Go back and look at it. It's either along Buckberry or that corridor. In other words, you could come down Buckberry down the cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac seems to be rounded, right? It doesn't seem to leak out to the corridor.
No.
So maybe it was.
So, hey, DJ, while you're up there, what is the street that runs east and west on the south side? No. What is it? No, east and west, straight.
Remember.
No, I know that, but is there a one,
No,
there is,
It's curved this way, Mitchell, and it's curved like that, radius, same like that. Each corner in this track is that
okay. Thank you.
very symmetrical. Bunch of tight lots in the middle.
Well,
That's that
yeah, I think,
area possible. Tiny little overlay possible.
We don't have a planning commission meeting till August 6th.
I just got a text from one of my colleagues who needs also to pass away and drainage directly to the. But we'll bring the track map in.
All right, here's what I propose. Staff research with the assistance of Mr. Toohey, and then if we need to discuss this on August 6th, at the next scheduled meeting, we'll bring it up again. I hope that doesn't skew the current timeline too bad. All right, can we call this particular item closed for the evening?
Yes.
All right, on to PM2.
Well,
It is an update of the city's rezoning and general plan amendment projects, including timelines. Staff, go for it.
yes, well, actually, we talked a little bit about this, but the staff, in order to undertake the airport area rezoning, there's a lot of moving parts, and that was discussed the last time, and we'd be looking forward to having Planning Commission public hearing on September 3rd, which is the day after Labor Day, by the way. But the date just seemed to make sense for the overall schedule. And with that, we would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the schedule. And if we could get to the Planning Commission on September 3rd with a recommendation for the rezoning and the general plan amendment, then we'd be moving on to the City Council by October 8th.
Looks good to me. Anybody have any comments or objections?
I don't know.
Three times come into effect.
It's been in the Muni Code probably since you were on the police force.
Probably.
So now we're going to come out of the dark ages.
somebody started reading things.
No, it sounds good. It sounds good. Does nobody, no, okay. Public, I'll give you a couple opportunities if anybody wants to speak on this. Hey, 3, 2, 1, done. Let's move on.
Okay. Next item, planning commissioners will recall last April, we had a general discussion meeting about a lot of topics, and one item that everyone sorely,
Oh, time out. We haven't done PM2 yet.
that was PM2.
Didn't see, I mean, what I'm looking at on mine, I didn't see any, that's part of PM1. That's all part of PM1 in my package. So this was PM2 we've been discussing? Because PM2 in my package, I don't know if anybody else has anything different, but it's the update of the city's rezoning and GPA projects, including timelines. So maybe those timelines should have been in this
Yes,
second
yes.
package?
Yes, correct.
They kind
So
of
we do
merged.
need to discuss the general plan amendment. Okay, never mind. So PM2 and PM1 should have been combined.
Yes, correct.
All right.
And the only thing we would point out is what we did, and that is we have to amend the ordinance to have 4 general plan amendments a year, and that will be forthcoming in the next few months. We're coming to the Planning Commission We're recommending August 6th, which is your next meeting, to come to the commission for a request that you recommend that the city council amend the ordinance to allow 4 general plan amendments a year in lieu of 3. And if that all goes well, we'll be to the city council by September and have them amend the ordinance.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
Nope.
DJ, you said you needed a clarification?
So there's a couple of zone changes up there on the screen. 1908, 10, and 11. And so that's going to go uninterfered with July 23rd. Is that the 3rd or the 4th?
There will be no July 23rd meeting at the city council level. Right now, we've actually had all of our general plan amendment hearings that we're entitled to, because we're only entitled to 3.
When were you going to tell the property owners?
This is something that they've noticed just when they were looking through some of the stuff, and it's a screw up.
So my suggestion tonight is that you have 5 votes, change the agenda, approve a new agenda with 5 votes, and have the discussion tonight, because there are people counting on July 23rd.
Even if we decide that we want to change the general plan to this, it has to be approved by the city council, and you got first and second reading and all that other stuff. So it's a process that it's going to have, it starts here, and they wanted to have a public hearing on it. We can't do a public hearing without proper notification.
So this discussion needs to be noticed for the PC as well.
We are noting it, and yes, whatever discussion we have is going to be put in, it will be part of the public hearing. So we do have a meeting on the 6th, I guarantee it.
Let me rephrase that. You're talking about advertising that type of public notice
Right.
for your
Exactly, for a
discussion-
public hearing.
For your discussion, before it goes forward to the city.
Well, no, we can't send anything without approval on a public hearing and us doing a resolution, and then the city council will take it up. And then if they approve it, they got first and second reading.
Okay. I'm a little disappointed that the property owners weren't.
I
noticed.
completely agree with you, but we're trying to
More than a
correct
little.
this.
I'm just trying to keep it calm here.
I understand. We're trying to correct whatever mistakes we might have made. So we'll get it. And I have I don't think that anybody up here has any disagreements with increasing the GPA to 4. So, because we've got a lot to do. And we can't just do it in 3, because that would be every 4 months. We should be doing it every 3 months.
The other thing is, I really don't want those that are in the pipeline to be bundled with 500 others.
It doesn't matter the quantity you put in a bundle. The quantity is irrelevant. I mean, we could put all 138 parcels from the airport zone into one GPA if we want to. The problem is we're only supposed to submit 3 per year to update the Muni code,
And for,
or the GPA, general plan, rather, I'm sorry.
we're all clear that you're saying 3 absolutely have already been approved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two in January and 1 in February.
We've been jumping the gun.
So the state will allow us to do 4. Our Muni code will only allow us to do 3, and we did, what, 63 last year?
It all depends on, I guess it all depends on, I was in the dark as far as that goes too. I did not read the Muni code to look at it and see how many we could do for a year. I was never apprised of that when I first came on commission, to be honest with you. But we are trying to rectify that. And we'll do it as expeditiously as we can, but we all know the cogs of government. All right, so our discussion for tonight is whether or not we want to push forward, it's real simple, and add one more amendment to the general plan and put it in the Muni code, or at least get council to go along with us. And I have no problem standing up in front of council and telling them that this, with all of the items that we're pushing forward due to cannabis and other things, that we need to have an additional one. And oh, by the way, just in as administrative, The word Q that you're looking at is QUE, not CUE. It's not pool.
No.
But just kidding. Anyway, so,
I got to interrupt. I'm so sorry. Thank you for the grace. This is really important. We have super priority properties that have utilities that we've had communications with staff, planning department, that we wanted to bring forward over a year ago. And so there was discussion about putting these, bundling them together. And to some degree, please forgive me, but this is really important. We got a bunch of properties that don't have any utilities, that will probably likely never be developed, that are taking all these damn spots for the GPAs. Let me finish, please. This is why we sent to the Planning Commission a recommendation that you score the GPAs based on those that actually are viable, that have utilities. And those are the ones that should have absolute preference. This is why we did this, particularly so you wouldn't have this situation where you got a bunch of properties that may not be viable for a period of time, many that don't have power, interfering in properties that really are viable and suitable, that have power, that have sewer, that have water. And none of this made it to your Planning Commission for your discretion. That disturbs me. It further disturbs me now that we don't know what we're doing and we can't get those pushed forward. This is a perplexing situation. I'm going to try to bring my tone down, but
please do, because now you're going to raise mine. So if you don't mind, finish and please sit down. Finish your thoughts and then please sit down.
yeah,
Then
I
I'm going to
appreciate
speak
that.
and
No,
we're
I
going to end
appreciate
this.
that. I appreciate that. It respectfully, it concerns me that there wasn't a professional response to that recommendation, and that does concern me. Thank you for your time.
Okay, now, my turn. And I'm not going to take any other questions on this. The GPAs, there are no limit to what we can put into a single GPA that goes forward from the city. We can do 550 at one time. Okay? So there's no real reason to rack and stack any GPA. If a GPA comes in during the 3-month period, at the end of that 3-month period, it will be put forth to the council. They'll bundle it and submit it. Am I not correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to work towards now. We're not discussing, okay? We are not discussing this. So, Planning Commission, do you want to add a 4th GPA to the code? Just tell me yes or no. We'll tell staff. That's going to end this discussion.
I would think we should add a 4th.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I say yes too.
Okay.
Do a resolution for the hearing on the 6th. We'll hear public comment. We'll push it forth. Their next meeting's on the 13th. Can we get it to them on the 13th if we approve it? Or do we have to announce it?
We've been told by the city clerk that they need, that we can't advertise a public hearing, for example, on a recommendation of the Planning Commission until the Planning Commission acts on it. That's why we spread the dates the way we did.
No, what I'm saying is, if on the 6th of August, we approve our resolution,
Yes.
how soon before city council posts it? That it'll be on their agenda? Can it be on their agenda on the 13th of August?
No, because, again, we're not supposed to send out a public hearing notice until the commission acts. And so if you act on the 6th, and the newspaper needs about a week before they publish, and they have to publish for 10 days. So,
Oh, okay.
So
All right, so, okay, so
that's
the
all we're gonna
the
do.
earliest it's going to be is 27 August. That's the earliest it can be on council.
Yes, and we're recommending September 10th for the first.
Not this one. I would really, really push for August 27th. Whatever needs to be done, I'd try to push for it.
Now, we need 10 days to submit for public notice, right? Say we put this in public notice that this is coming up. Can we do it at 10 days, do a special council meeting?
Costs
Yeah.
money to do council meetings,
I mean,
do a special one just for that.
but then you would, if we did, say we did it today, you did the 10, you did the special council meeting, the commission meeting, where we acted on it, then would we still have time to get in on that early
Well, bear
August
in
meeting to the
mind that-
council?
Hang on a second, we can't do we can't do anything tonight. We can't do it, it has to be noticed in the public, in the papers and everything else. For us to do one, we have to do one on the 6th of August. That's the earliest we can do it. And that's gonna work. That timeline will work for us. But it's the timeline getting it from us to the council. So once I sign the resolution, then council can post it. Or does it have to be posted in the paper?
Well-
Just put it on the frickin' put it on the website. That's posting it. Everybody has internet.
Well, but the ordinance is pretty clear about a newspaper of general
That
circulation.
needs to be changed too. Any public media, any media product, it works the same. I'm not, yeah, anyway. All right, so our timeline is firm. We're going to do a public hearing on the 6th.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you understand, even if you do it on the 6th, for our purposes of the paper, the earliest we'd be able to get it in would be the 15th for the notice, so you'd have to work forward from there, so.
But if I sign the resolution on the 7th, we have the hearing on the 6th, I sign the resolution on the 7th, why can't it go to paper? Why can't they just put out an ad in your paper?
Well, we print tonight, on Tuesday for Thursday, so we're already at print for this week, so by the time the
We-
6th, on the 6th, we will have already printed for the 15th, or for the 8th. So you-
Means our meeting day, you're already printing on our
Right,
meeting
because
days.
we have to get it back from the printer.
So we
Okay,
missed
so,
that day.
but we can still get it on council for the 27th.
I just wanted to let you know from
We-
our end of.
It can work for council on 27th.
Okay.
We need to push for that to be on the agenda for council on the 27th.
Could you tell us why it's so critical to move it about a week?
The sooner we get it done, the better off it's going to be for all the businesses.
Well,
For everybody that wants to develop, I suppose they can push forward with their projects.
except that, bear in mind, we're looking at the airport area rezoning.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of moving parts to make that happen.
No, I think the GPA needs to take precedence over that. I mean, it's all going to have to move together,
Right.
but
So-
I don't see where,
Say you don't have the manpower to push it.
because once city council approves it, okay, then that is the first reading, the first night. That's the first reading, if I remember right.
Yes,
Then the next council meeting is the second reading.
correct,
And if it's approved then, in 30 days, it becomes law.
correct.
So you're still looking at tenth of October.
Right. Well,
That's when it will become law.
exactly. And if you look at this, we're talking about October 8th as being the public hearing to approve the general plan amendments and the rezonings. So it was all thought out ahead of time.
Oh, man.
General plan amendments? I don't know.
It all depends on how many were actually submitted, DJ. It really depends on how and when they were submitted. If they were bundled together and submitted in 3 packages, then that's the way they went in. I'm sure they were done that way. Yeah.
But-
But what I'm trying to
We
do
don't
now
have-
is I'm trying to reconcile in my head how we can separate the airport rezone and the GPA amendment and still make them come together.
We thought we'd done that.
Well, no, because if city council doesn't approve it until October 8th, we're looking at December before it becomes law. So that's why I wanted to get it in, get at least the GPA part into city council by 27 October, which put it, by August 27, yeah. which will put it in, it will, if everything goes correctly, it will become law on October 10th,
Okay.
as opposed to December. So that's that's 2 months ahead. And then, and oh, by the way, I think I asked the question, is this calendar year or fiscal year? Does it follow fiscal or calendar?
Calendar year.
All right, so we could do a GPA in October based on that. Or and then,
Okay. So if you look at page 2 of the second memo, Public Meeting 2 memo, there's a table on page 2. And in terms of this general plan amendment, we're looking at Planning Commission to consider the text amendment on August 6th, as you have pointed out.
correct.
And then with that recommendation, we were hoping the council could have its public hearing on September 10th for the first reading, and then the second reading on September 24th.
Sean, can you put that up on, so everyone can see what he's talking about? Do you have that?
Okay.
No, it's not on there?
Yeah, it's just a slideshow.
Okay.
But
Next meeting, hopefully we'll have that.
Are we kind of looking at some manpower issues to be able to accomplish, do this, what we're talking with some of the changes and now including this?
Well, maybe we can just
I mean-
leave it as, the commission would like this done as quickly and expeditiously as possible.
Right. But, doing, like you said, all the moving parts,
Right,
I mean, that puts it on you guys in the office.
right.
I mean, like you said, with all the moving parts, to get it done, is that where we're going to have some trouble? Because you only got so many hours in a day.
Yeah, no, we thought we were going to get everything wrapped up by October 8th.
But this is another curve, though. This adds some more to your plate.
let me interject, I'm sorry. Wrapped up by October 8th means what? The city council finalizes the resolution?
Yes. No, not, the resolution should be,
The
the second reading should be September 24th on the GPA going to 4 a year.
Okay,
And we're looking at October 8th for the city council to approve all the general plan amendments and all the rezonings.
okay, so it would become law October 24th,
If you will.
right?
Well,
If you give it 30 days from second reading,
right,
assuming everything,
correct.
there's no
That's correct.
glitches.
right.
And if we do and October 8th, yeah, why wouldn't it work? It slips it out a month, but we can still get another one in this calendar year.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's a big difference to act in October versus waiting until
I would like,
January.
I don't know if the commission agrees with me, but I would like to see if we can get this to council, just the GPA part, separately, which is what you're planning, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's no way it can go out to the 27th instead of the, or are you, hang on a second, never mind, you got it, you got it for the 27th. Okay, all right. Looks like timing-wise, it's probably the best we're going to be able to do. Okay. I know somebody in this room is steaming, but I apologize for that. Breathe deep. All right, let's move on to PM3. Sorry, folks.
Yes. Well, the commission had a general discussion meeting last April, and one of the topic areas that we promised we would bring to you would be California Environmental Quality Act. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to John Bellis, was with Michael Baker International. They have been our secret consultants. And John, you're welcome to be up there, but if you want to switch chairs with me, you can actually control the slides.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Matthew, and Chair Creighton and members of the Planning Commission. I'm pleased to be here tonight to give you a brief overview on the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, as we say for short. It is going to be a general overview. I could talk for hours on this subject, but I won't bore you to death with details. But please do interject at any time during my presentation with questions, or you can hold questions to the end as well, but I want this to be as informative and helpful for you guys as
Yeah, I would like to hold questions until his briefing is over, and then we'll do the same thing here up dais in public and then dais again. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. So what is the purpose of CEQA? There are multiple purposes, but primarily it's to inform decision makers and the public about the potential environmental consequences and the environmental effects of a project before it gets approved. It's also to identify ways to reduce environmental damage, and that's done either through mitigation measures or alternatives to a project that would accomplish the same basic project objectives. If the agency decides to approve a project that has, quote, significant impacts on the environment, CEQA requires that the reasons that that agency approves that project in spite of its significant impacts be disclosed to the public at the time that a project is approved. So CEQA applies to discretionary actions of a government agency. So it does not apply to ministerial actions of a government agency, and it doesn't apply to someone in the general public. But anytime a public agency in California, including a municipality such as your city, decides whether or not to approve a project, it has to go through a CEQA review process. So the difference between something that's discretionary and something that's ministerial is a discretionary approval is something that the city can say no to. It can consider all the evidence in the record and then say, despite all of that, we still don't want to approve this project. A ministerial action is one that if an application comes in and it meets all the letter of the law, all the requirements, the city doesn't have a choice. It needs to approve that permit. And so examples of discretionary governmental actions that you might be faced with would be things like a general plan amendment, a zone change, conditional use permit, variance, tentative tract or parcel map, development agreement, any type of funding that a city issues for a development project or an infrastructure project, any capital improvement that the city decides to undertake on its own. Any type of, like I said, any type of approval that the city can say, no, we decide we're not going to do this, or that we are going to do this, even though we have the choice to not do it. A ministerial type approval would be something like a building permit, where the project comes in and it meets the zoning code, meets the intent of the general plan, and the application shows exactly how it's going to meet all the requirements of the building code. In that case, the city doesn't have the discretion to say no. And in those cases, CEQA would not apply. So when CEQA does apply, there are four basic types of CEQA review. There are projects that, in enacting CEQA, the state legislature said, you know, it may not make sense that every discretionary approval of an agency needs to go through some lengthy environmental review process. We should have some exemptions that are available for public agencies. So there are some exemptions, and I'm going to go through what those types of exemptions are in one of the future slides. If a project is a discretionary approval, is not exempt from CEQA, the next level of potential review would be a negative declaration. And so that would be the lead agency, in this case the city, saying, look, we've done our environmental analysis, which would typically be an initial study, And based on that analysis, the project would not have a significant effect on the environment, and we're making a declaration that there are no negative impacts, no significant impacts. A wrinkle on that would be the city prepares an initial study and finds, well, the project could have a significant impact on the environment, but there are ways to mitigate that impact, and we've required that those mitigation measures be implemented. And in those cases, the city can prepare what's called a mitigated negative declaration. Now, if you go through that initial environmental review process and you found that there would be significant effects of the project that cannot be mitigated to a less than significant level, that's when you would have to prepare a full environmental impact report. And that's when you hear people saying this project needs a full environmental review. They're usually referring to an environmental impact report. Now, I would say as an environmental consultant, the analysis that we do for a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration is just as involved as the environmental analysis that we would do for an environmental impact report. But an environmental impact report would require that we analyze a few other things like alternatives to the project, ways to accomplish the project objectives that would avoid that same significant impact. So those are the four basic types of environmental reviews, and I will kind of elaborate on the process for each of those. So I mentioned that the legislature had included exemptions to CEQA in the CEQA guidelines. And what the CEQA guidelines say that a project is exempt from CEQA if it's exempt by statute. So the legislature said, despite the environmental impacts of certain activities, they should be exempt from CEQA, regardless. Things like emergency actions, that type of thing. They also said there are certain types of projects, certain categories of projects that generally do not have significant effects on the environment, and they should be exempt from CEQA too, and those are called categorical exemptions. Now, some of those require a little bit more thought and analysis and proof that it fits into that category of exemption than, say, a statutory exemption, but they are very powerful exemptions as well. And then the third thing that the legislature said is that by common sense, there should be some projects that we're not thinking of, but they would never have a significant effect on the environment. So we're going to say they're exempt from CEQA. And that's what is called the general rule or the common sense exemption from CEQA, where it can be clearly seen that the project could not have a significant effect on the environment. It's not subject to CEQA. So some common activities that are exempt from CEQA, some common, I'll say, development type activities, all of the ones on the slide before you are, quote, categorical exemptions. There are 33 classes of categorical exemptions in the state CEQA guidelines, and I've put only 4 of them here on the slide. But these are the ones that I see most utilized. Class 1 is when you have an existing facility and you're just going to modify it, and you're not going to change the use or increase the intensity of the use in any meaningful way. That would be categorically exempt from CEQA. Same is true if you're, say, demolishing something and just replacing it more or less in kind with the same use in the same location. It would be categorically exempt from CEQA, and that's class 2. The class 3 categorical exemption is for new construction. So this is would be a new use. But there are of limited scale. So some examples would be single-family residences, multifamily properties with up to 4 units and up to 25,000 square feet of commercial space. There's an exemption that the legislature added about a decade ago called for infill development projects. It's class 32. And this is an exemption that could exempt even some large-scale projects if they meet certain requirements, large-scale development requirements, but they can't have significant impacts on air quality, noise, traffic, or water quality, and they need to meet the definition of an infill project. So if your project's not exempt from CEQA and would not have a significant effect on the environment, you would go through the negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration process, and that's what this slide outlines. So the general steps on that would be that staff or staff with consultants would prepare what's known as an initial study. and a proposed negative declaration, and then publish a public notice called a Notice of Intent to Adopt a Negative Declaration. And that notice requires a 20 to 30-day public review period. And what CEQA says is any comments that are received on a neg deck or a mitigated neg deck, those comments need to be considered by the lead agency as part of the record before they make a decision to approve the project. Formal responses to comments are not required, but often are prepared depending on the nature of the comments. So with the initial study prepared, circulated for public review, and the public comments in hand, then the decision-making body, such as yourselves or the city council, can take action to approve the project once it's considered those environmental consequences and any comment letters that have been received. The EIR process, the Environmental Impact Report process, is a little bit more involved. There's another step or two in the process, and you can see this slide is a flow chart for the EIR process, and it presents a lot of information. I'm just going to go kind of across the top layer and provide a little bit of detail about what each of those steps means. So the first step in an EIR process is what's called a notice of preparation, or this would be called the scoping phase. And this is when the city would decide, with input from the public, on what topics should be studied in detail in the EIR. So there's a public comment period just on that, just to decide what should be studied in the EIR. And then once that comment period ends, then the city would go about in earnest preparing the analysis and preparing that draft environmental impact report. When that's completed, then a notice is published saying the city has completed a draft environmental impact report. We're posting it for public consideration and public comment. And that's a minimum 45-day public review period that any interested individuals, organizations, or agencies can provide comments to the city on what's in the draft environmental impact report. For an EIR, the city would be required to prepare a formal responses to comments document, and that would be the bulk of what then constitutes your final environmental impact report. So the final EIR would be the draft EIR plus the comment letters and the city's responses to those comment letters. And that combined package would then be provided to the Planning Commission or City Council, depending on who the decision-making body is, would be required to consider all that information, and then based on all that information and any other merits that would go along with the project, to decide whether or not to approve the project. But only once that process has been completed can action be taken. That completes my summary presentation on CEQA. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners?
I have none.
Richard? Ron?
Just one. One topic that we come across is the CEQA, the time restraints. Where have you had success streamlining some of this to move some of this forward? That seems to be what some people have trouble with.
Yeah, I think the most powerful streamlining tools that are in CEQA are the exemptions. There have been multiple efforts over the last decade at the legislature level to, quote, streamline CEQA, and they are largely unsuccessful because they end up adding more complexity than they do streamlining. In some situations they do help, but they're generally, the streamlining provisions are to carve out new exemptions. The Class 32 categorical exemption for infill development projects that I mentioned in the slideshow, to me has been the most powerful tool for streamlining CEQA that the legislature has enacted. I've seen some pretty large-scale land development projects be exempt from CEQA under that categorical exemption.
So, like that 32, now, is that like doing an industrial park type thing? What would be included in that would classify it as and get people into that exemption to be able to move things a little quicker?
It can be. There are certain limitations. The site cannot be more than 5 acres. The project needs to be consistent with the general plan, with the zoning designation, with general plan policies, and with zoning regulations. So that eliminates a lot of projects off the bat. If you have, say, a variance from your zoning code, generally would not fit within that exemption. Or if you require a general plan amendment or a zone change, anything like that would not qualify for that exemption. But if it's consistent with the general plan and zoning designation, that's a good way to streamline.
Now, is there certain words that kind of trigger, like corridor, you know, industrial zone, words that are better suited to move things in that direction? You know what, I'm not sure. You know, certain words, it's like anything else, they'll trigger you, put you in this category versus in another category. It's just how we word it when it comes down to it, ain't it?
There can be, but I think we would work with city staff to make sure the language is properly crafted, to make sure that if we're recommending an exemption on a project, that the language defines the project to meet within the confines of an exemption.
Thank you.
I have a question. If you can clarify this for me, I need to get better understanding with this. Earlier this year, we went to an academy for planners. And one of the things that was brought up in one of the CEQA meetings was that a project can't move forward until CEQA is certified. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so I think what the presenter was trying to say there in a simple way is, as a decision-making body, you cannot take action to approve a project until you've completed the CEQA process. So usually the CEQA action occurs at the same time you decide whether or not to approve a project. For instance, you might see a resolution that says, adopt a mitigated negative declaration and approve zone change number XYZ. So you're taking action on both at the same time. The CEQA action would be listed first because the law requires that the CEQA determination be made before the action on the project approval.
So would that be the part of the planning commissioner, as if something came to planning, we would be the ones certifying?
So generally so let me say that CEQA itself as a law or the guidelines don't specify who within a governmental agency is responsible or has the authority to approve a CEQA determination. Generally, that authority lies with whatever body is making a decision on the project approval. So it can even, there are things there are projects that are subject to CEQA that are approved even at the staff level, certain capital improvements that would never rise to the scope or scale that would come before you guys or before the city council, for example. The staff might be making a CEQA determination at the same time they decide to, improve a sidewalk, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? I just got one question. When you had the scoping for an EIR, the scoping phase, are there any general items that are typically noted in the scoping phase as far as that are continually from project to project?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of project and the setting in which the project is proposed. In a developed area, we tend to see air quality, noise, greenhouse gas, and traffic impacts be the ones that always show up.
Okay.
In undeveloped areas, you'll often see biological resources or cultural resources, wildfire hazards, those types of things.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else come up? All right, public, now's your chance to get some possible free advice. Sure, help yourself. Please.
Yes, one question. An item that, of course, wasn't mentioned, but I'm going to mention it, is that there is an overriding consideration, meaning that the city council could basically override portion of the EIR. My question is that what is that limit of overriding consideration of city council? Is it like 10%, 50%, the whole EIR?
So, yes, what you're referring to is a statement of overriding consideration.
Exactly.
So if you've prepared an EIR and that EIR identifies significant effects on the environment that can't be mitigated to a less than significant level, the city can still choose to approve the project. The only caveat is along with that approval, they need to adopt a statement of reasons why they're approving the project despite there being environmental impacts. And there's no hard and fast rule that a certain number of impacts can be overridden versus some number that can't be overridden. There's not types of environmental impacts that can be overridden versus other types that cannot be overridden. It really is at the discretion of the decision-making body to weigh the overriding benefits of the project to see if those benefits are greater than the significant environmental consequences of the project. So if there's enough substantial evidence to support a statement that the benefits of this project outweigh the significant adverse environmental impacts, then the lead agency, the city in this case, could choose to approve the project.
Regardless of the importance or the scope of that particular issue?
Correct.
Okay. Now, my second question is that of course, let's say a project, the lead agency is the city. Then what would be the responsible agency?
So very good question. So a responsible agency under CEQA is an agency other than the lead agency that also has discretionary approval authority. So a lead agency is the agency with with the primary approval authority over the project, and a responsible agency is another government agency that also has approval over the project. So, for example, a project, say, here in the desert, there might be endangered species present on that site, as an example. And there may be a project before the city to approve some tract of residential homes, as an example. And the city's purview is to consider the tract of homes, and does it fit within the general plan and the zoning, and does it make sense for the city? And to consider the environmental consequences as part of the CEQA process. But the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has discretionary permit authority over the protection of those endangered species that may be existing on site. So after the city went through its process, approved the project, then the Department of Fish and Wildlife would take up the issue as to whether or not they can approve the taking of an endangered species. And their role as a responsible agency would be to look at the city's CEQA documentation and determine whether or not that was adequate for them to make their decision.
Right. And my last question, sorry that I'm asking so many questions,
please.
is that when the lead agency distribute the draft EIR to the different departments for comments, and let's say engineering comes up with the issue that yes, 10-foot dedication is required, certain drainage is required, as well as the sewer and so forth. Now, when that comment goes to the planning, which is in this case lead agency, that really becomes a part of the EIR, and the applicant cannot change it. Of course, they can ask for a scoping meeting, but nonetheless, eventually it shows up in the final and becomes part of the document and becomes law. And so if that issue is unbearable for the applicant, then the applicant basically is stuck with that, correct?
Well, I think you're identifying a very unique, hopefully a very unique situation. I think one thing that I'd like to clarify is that the lead agency, any project that is before planning or before engineering, the lead agency in that case would be the City of California City, not an individual department of the city. And so there are internal processes that I'm not educated to speak to here in California City as to internal review processes, feedback from different departments, and hopefully that's happening to help formulate the project. In the case where an internal city department, say, commented in a public review period on a CEQA document, a draft CEQA document, then those comments would become part of the public record. And then the issue becomes a matter of public debate. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily set in stone, but I would say that it's then in the public forum as to whether or not those comments are valid and necessary or needed. But I wouldn't say that just because they were written in the public forum that they're set in stone.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello again. I didn't catch your name.
John Bellis.
John. Hi, John. D.
Please call me John. Yes.
Yes. And so at the Planning Commission, they've had projects come through here that are zone changes. And in that application, we see those identified as a project. And there's been discussion about, well, it's not a project, it's lines on a map, it's an overlay, it's a zone, it's not per se a project. But once we have the potentially a zone change, then you come back with an application for a development project, then it really becomes a project. So could you speak to, we have planners in our staff as well, but could you speak to the Planning Commission, why is it a project, even though there's not a project, and how they ought to view that from an environmental point of view when these documents are coming forward? It's really not a 500,000 square foot cannabis facility. It's a zone change that would allow potentially a future 500,000 square foot, any kind of industrial facility. Maybe you could speak to that as it relates to a project.
Sure. So a zone change, as I had a slide early in the presentation, is one of the discretionary approvals that the city has under their authority. And any discretionary approval can be subject to CEQA. And the question then lies in if it's subject to CEQA, is it exempt from CEQA? And then that's the question that you need to ask yourself and that staff needs to present to you as a planning commission as to whether or not it's exempt from CEQA. I mentioned some exemptions. One item that I mentioned was the quote common sense or general rule exemption from CEQA, where CEQA only applies where there's a reasonable possibility that there would be an effect on the environment if it can be seen with certainty that the approval would not result in an impact on the environment, then it's exempt from CEQA by that common sense rule. So that's a consideration that I know staff has presented to the Planning Commission here in the past.
Anybody else from the public wish to ask any questions or make any comments regarding Mr. Bellis's presentation? Anything come back to commissioners? No?
I have nothing.
Good. Mr.
No.
Bellis, I thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
It was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, my pleasure. Nice to be here tonight.
That brings us to public meeting item number 4. Update of the California City Boulevard Corridor Study. Staff, here we go.
Yes, Chairman Craven, members of the commission, this is the time and the place to consider a public meeting item. The commission has talked in the past about an interest in undertaking a corridor study. Since that time, the staff has been in touch with a couple of university departments, Department of Agriculture, Department of Architecture, and Department of Planning at both Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and UCLA. Both schools have expressed an interest in working with us as part of the curriculum next year. The downside is we're very interested in working with Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. They have a reputation of being a very hands-on planning curriculum. And everything, it sounds like they're interested in us, we're interested in them. The only downside is that the current schedule, they could not begin until next April, and that is a long time to wait. The head of the department is going to meet with the chairman of the department to see if they couldn't possibly begin working with us in January. Also, part of the what makes us hopeful with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is they have a few students that might be able to start in advance. And with that in mind, your planning staff decided that this is important enough that we wanted to start in advance. So we'd like to give you an overview of what we see as important on Cal City Boulevard. First of all, it's the east-west spine thoroughfare of our entire city. It's very critical. It's hard to come to Cal City and not spend some time on Cal City Boulevard. And Sean was giving me some numbers earlier today that I think is worth considering. Or are they? Well, the width of Cal City Boulevard from the entire right-of-way is very significant. It ranges from 137 feet to on up to 194 feet.
Now, is that Cal City Boulevard proper or including the two frontage roads?
That includes the two frontage
Two frontage roads, okay.
So, I mean, in some places, it's almost 200 feet wide, which gives the commission, the city, a tremendous opportunity to be innovative and do creative things. So here it is, looking pretty much from Hacienda westward, right? We wanted to show this. We understand that there was a garden club project that came up with the landscaping.
Oh, the median?
Yes.
Yeah.
The one median. Landscaping would certainly be part of the study. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it's a major part of it. And this is a wonderful example of what can be done with, I believe, those are pretty much drought-tolerant species. But we would not have to stick with this. But the point is that maybe what would be important would be to have something consistent. Okay. Staff has kicked around where would you begin, where would you end. I mean, clearly, I guess you could do a corridor study from the Shell station all the way beyond, but Proctor, okay, but it makes a whole lot more sense if you could contain it. So we were thinking pretty much to do it in 3 super blocks from Nerelia up to Hacienda. So how far is that?
Roughly 3 miles,
Yeah.
I believe.
And that in itself,
2 or 3 miles.
that might be a little too aggressive,
Yeah.
but
I think it's actually 2.
but we see a lot of opportunities in Cal City Boulevard. The first, of course, is the tremendous width that we have to work with. Another one is that there is the frontage roads that Chairman Creighton mentioned. They can be put to great use. Here's an example, frontage road.
Yeah, and we're really looking at this as a blank slate. So, and there's not a lot of infrastructure right now, so we can do, I mean, it's a blank canvas. Mile and a half.
Yep.
And that's plenty long enough to do an effective project. Yeah, so there's the width. So the other day, Sean and I went to Lancaster. Has everybody been to the boulevard in Lancaster?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're not, because we know that it would be very controversial to propose making Cal City Boulevard to go from a 4-lane travel lanes to 2 lanes, which is what they did in Lancaster. So we're not proposing that, but it would have to be considered as a possible option, along with many other alternatives. So here, first thing you notice is the very generous landscaping that access on the boulevard, Lancaster Boulevard. And you never know who you're going to run into there, but street furniture is very important. So not only having some consistent trash receptacles, benches, light standards, getting away from the very tall Cobra head lights to have a more pedestrian-oriented, decorative street lighting is very helpful. Certainly signage that has easily identifiable for the street signage and as well as any of the directional signage is important. Having certain paving materials would be very helpful. As of course, along with the trash receptacles.
I do believe that's for the library. No, it's recyclables. Never mind.
Yeah, it's a solar trash compactor
Serious? Wow.
along with recyclables.
And, and it was very controversial in Lancaster to come up with a concept to eliminate 2 moving lanes of traffic and replace it with parking. But it seems to work. We feel we would make such a radical recommendation, we'd certainly double check with the city of Lancaster, find out what the average daily traffic volumes are in these
Oh, it's
areas.
considerable. It is considerable. But I think the biggest thing people have a problem with down there is the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't think that's going to fly here.
How long is the boulevard there in Lancaster?
Roughly a
Study
mile.
area where they go from,
From where it goes from the,
It goes from Sierra Highway to 10th Street West,
yeah, so it's
3/4.
just under a mile,
how
probably.
far,
Probably
1
just under a
mile?
mile.
And we're dealing with
A mile and a half.
a mile and a
They're
half,
very
but just
similar.
from Neuralia to
Hacienda.
Hacienda. Okay. What about before that and after?
Well, it's the same thing.
But are we looking at one focal point to start and bridge out from there? Like at one of the intersections where we have some spare lots that could be developed to some extent to centralize kind of a meeting spot, and like
well,
the one thing like trees here and benches along the boulevard.
Part of this meeting is to kind of figure out the scope of how we want to do this. Do we want to phase it in? Do we want to go at it all at once? Do we want to make the plan first? Do we want to focus on a smaller area and, improve that first? So that's up to the commission. But what I'd like to point out is right now, CCB, California City Boulevard, is really auto-oriented, and it's also constructed to bring people through town. Whereas in Lancaster, it's much more pedestrian-oriented, people-oriented.
To shop.
Yeah, and that's
Shop and dine.
exactly. And
Shop
it's to
and dine.
slow people down. It's same as a river. If you have a
Well, that's-
rush of rapids, it's just all going to go through. But if you slow that down, then you'll get a lot more sediment to stay similar to people.
And for me, I don't know if for me, I don't see we're doing the whole corridor through there, but specifically more through where the businesses are. Like you said, slow them down. You don't want to, because we're scattered. So it's hard to build a corridor through where you have, at the end of town where we have one business.
Yeah,
And it's sad that, you got to pick and choose, but through a certain Friends Tires, for example, that's 80% of our business is through town, right in that little section.
So
I would think we'd want to concentrate on the biggest portion to start.
And we absolutely can. Again, that's your decision. But this is planning. So this will be the groundwork for when development does come in. They have a plan to follow. They have some infrastructure to follow.
But the people that we're looking at San Luis Obispo or UCLA, they would have to have that groundwork.
Part
The
of what-
scope to where we want to develop it
Right. Yeah.
to start.
And part of what they would help would be the visioning process, the public involvement process to figure out exactly what we want this to look like.
but probably the biggest opportunity is when you look at the wide width of the frontage roads. I mean, they're not, for all intent and purposes, Some of them have been eliminated, like right here near City Hall, from the original plan, and it doesn't seem like traffic suffers that much without them. But the opportunity for these frontage roads and that wide median, or not the median, but the median between the frontage road and the street, is you'd have an opportunity to create some angled parking and possibly some very shallow commercial buildings. And since it's public right-of-way, the city would have that opportunity to sell it to entrepreneurs that would have to agree to building it in a certain manner. So you could actually line both sides with commercial buildings.
So you're talking like little kiosks type?
No, extending the property further into the right-of-way right now, as it is right now. So you'd allow a little deeper lots to form along California City Boulevard, and still allow for a wide pedestrian sidewalk along with angled parking, possibly parking in the median if that's the route we want to go.
But I think you could actually do some commercial buildings in
I have a question. Excuse me. It's very difficult for me personally to envision this. So is what the project going to be? Is there going to draw out some
Yes.
things so that we can take a look how this is going to, come about? Because I just don't see how you're going to reduce the size of Cal City Boulevard to make it more like Lancaster Boulevard. I can't see that, but I'm sure you guys probably
Yeah.
can.
If you want to give us direction to show you, we'll be more
Yeah,
than
that's
happy
what
to,
I'm
yeah.
looking for. I'm hoping that you guys can do that, or
Yeah.
the students will be able to do it, and then we can all see what the plan would be, and then we can sure get behind it and say, yeah, this looks like a great thing. Right now, to me, I'm saying, it's just too big. It's enormous. How do you deal with it? How do you reduce it?
And we could focus it, into a narrow area if that's what we want to do to
Well,
maybe
even
see
if
how
you,
it's
yeah, even
working.
if you went between Neuralia and Hacienda, you've got a big stretch of road for one thing, and not only that, it's very wide. And you've got mixed use, you've got residential, you've got commercial. In Lancaster, it's all commercial. They don't have anybody living on the boulevard there.
Should be a walkway.
That said, all the properties that do front California City Boulevard are actually all commercial. Even if they look like a house, that's why you see some of these transitioning over to commercial.
the zoning is commercial.
The zoning is commercial, yeah, and the use as well.
Well, I think
There's
what
some
we
that are
need,
grandfathered in, but
and I think what we need to keep in mind too is that we're just beginning. So that
Exactly.
there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen. There's a lot of ideas that need to go around.
and what I'd like to really emphasize is just how blank this canvas really is. Yeah, I mean, from 135 to almost 200 feet wide compared to Lancaster with, they're at their widest 104. So, I mean, we're almost double as wide as they are, which means we have that much more room to play with.
And that's just one idea. I would like to see, I know that we're already looking at 1.5 miles, but it's not that much further if we take it up to Isabella. I really want that included in our ideas and the vision, because most of that area is bare anyway, so there's not going to be a lot of, Yes, which is,
Yeah, that could
needs
be,
to be included.
that could be more of a audio-oriented part of this, and then as you hit Neuralia, it becomes more pedestrian-oriented.
Yeah, and
Something
it
like
doesn't
that.
have to be, we're doing all of that one way, but I do want that to be part of the corridor study. Please. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments. I wasn't really considering all the way to Isabella, but I would like to, I don't think we need to go east from North Loop, South Loop to Hacienda. There's really nothing there at the current time, with the exception of one still unbuilt property. I don't think you'd really want to put a lot of effort into that, but going to Isabella does kind of make sense to me. I would also like to look at Diamond Street in Roseman and Tehachapi Boulevard.
Yes.
Tehachapi Boulevard is still 4-lane. All they did was add stop signs. And it got people to slow down. We could drop the speed limit to 35. I mean, we'd probably need a traffic study, but drop the speed limit to 35 and add more stop signs. That would get people stopping and looking a little bit more.
Yeah, there's also some traffic calming you could do, addition to that, that helps people naturally slow down.
Yeah. I noticed that they're actually expanding something, they're not doing the same thing on the boulevard, but they're expanding Lancaster Boulevard to the west. They're adding in a rotary, in case anybody didn't know. It's about halfway built right now. And they've actually eliminated the 4-lane on 10th Street West on Lancaster Boulevard from 10th Street West all the way to Valley Central Way. It's all 1 lane each direction. They have put in massively wide bike lanes. I don't agree with them, but they've put them all in. That's a lot of green paint that they're putting down on the road. But I like the idea of the study. I like the idea of what you've got in the staff report saying that we have representatives from planning, Parks and Rec, City Council, Chamber of Commerce, at-large local residents. I would also advise you to ask Ann Richardson
And we
if
do
she'd
have
be interested in going along with this too.
We've already been in contact with her as well.
Because she's the one that actually designed most of the planting on the median. I really wish they would extend that further west, but,
I think
and
that's the
go
plan.
south, but.
They're just waiting on funding and
Yeah, and that's the other thing. This is going to cost a lot of money. And I don't know if the city really wants to put that kind of money into this at that time. But I concur with the plan. And let's move forward with it. But at this time, let's open it up to the public. See what kind of comments or questions or ideas they might have.
Good evening again, and I'm breathing a little better. Thank you for your concern. It's tough.
You need a defibrillator. We got one.
needs to haul ambulance.
I won't express to you the thoughts that went through my mind, but I'll share with you some ideas on the corridor study. A couple of items, a lot of good conversations. Of course, we fed this back to you and tried to keep refreshing this because, as Sean mentioned, this is our major arterial, and we have not put forth any plans in the past many years other than the medium plan, which came out pretty nice. A lot of people, and NJ, I know you've been spearheading this also, make comment about the boulevard doesn't look so good. Well, we can sit and talk about it another 10 years, or we can do something. And so having this discussion, having this direction to staff to move this forward really is commendable, and we really need to get behind a starting place. You mentioned a blank canvas. It's not completely a blank canvas. You see the design of the roadway is this very wide area that can be well planned. And I'll make mention of a couple of things. One, heading west to Isabella is commercial on the north side and the south side. However, when you go west of Isabella, it's mostly multifamily and single family. So that really would be a natural cutoff if you choose at Isabella. If you look at the existing zoning coming towards Hacienda, that is C3, commercial and office space. And so that really is very suitable to continue it to Hacienda. Other than that, most of the boulevard heading west is residential. So it kind of fits. It fits pretty nicely. With respect to the perception coming through California City, it absolutely needs to change. I believe that there are significant potential for grants in the future for these type of improvements. The county put money into Mojave for its improvements through the Mojave Foundation. And so this is the beginning. And so what grants could we possibly get for street lighting? What grants could we possibly get for improvements? I know the Parks Department is doing their grant program right now, but there's probably a lot of opportunities once we get momentum and get started on this for significant improvements for appearance along the boulevard. And so I support this. I'm a property owner on the boulevard, and I would love to participate in this as well as a property owner. And so I encourage you. It's a great opportunity. We'd like to be very involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I like everything DJ said, which I'm saying because it's kind of unusual. I have a couple of questions. I knew you would be. I have a couple of questions. I'm assuming that the scope of the plan will be determined by the curriculum. If whoever we end up to work with, as they design their curriculum, that will give us an idea of how big the plan is.
Well, actually, it's our belief that the Cal Poly, if they're the selected group, will actually work around our schedule. I mean, the timelines are pretty firm because it's going to be the winter semester or the winter quarter, whatever. But in terms of the overall approach, I know in speaking to the head of the department that they're very interested in working with us and fulfilling our needs rather than their needs. What we're looking for in something like this is creativity. And so that's one of the beauties about going to a group of students, because if you have 28 or 30 students all participating, ideally you'd maybe break that group up into maybe 3 subgroups, and each one would come up with their own. It would be a design competition, and that would create, sometimes that's how you get the most innovation, by doing it that way.
And that's exciting to me. And then my other 2 are questions based on rumors that I've heard, so consider that I don't know if they're factual. One of the things that was said is CCB is auto-orientated rather than business-orientated. And at one point, I heard that there was an application that could be made for CCB business loop off of the 58 and the 14. So that's something I would ask. And the other thing is that I had heard that the reason that Neuralia is so wide and Redwood is so wide is because that funding that came in for that had originally been that would be a bypass. So possibly there's a way traffic orientation and the business orientation as you develop the plan.
I think I might be able to answer the question on the business loop. I did hear years ago the same thing, but I think a loop has to start and end on the same freeway, from what I understand. Am I wrong or right?
I'm not sure about that, but 58 would, because CCB continues past 14.
Yes, I understand that. But I don't know if the county is going to, or the state is going to allow that to become a loop, because you still have to, well, you have to go back onto it. But yeah, I mean, it would extend all the way out to the first exit past the 14.
Yeah, because what Sean's pointing out is we actually start at the 58
Right.
by Mojave, and we end at the 58 on CCB South. So it's a
Not
thought.
Mojave, not Mojave, going towards Tehachapi.
Yeah, towards Tehachapi.
Right.
But
And then
north of
they end
Mojave
up-
where the bridge is.
Yes.
And then over by the Edwards.
Right, right. But that's a lot of, I'm not seeing too many business loops with that much desolate area between the, but anyway, I agree. That's what I heard years ago, too.
You can reach out to Caltrans or the
Yeah.
county and see what they have on the books.
And along with her second question, I travel a bit. If you look at Bullhead City, Arizona, they have the main part of the main drag goes all the way down. There's a lot of stop signs, a lot of traffic lights, but they have a parkway that goes up and around. If you with minimal stop signs and traffic lights.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look into that. I actually know somebody from Bullhead City, so.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm glad that Cal Poly students could be involved in this issue. The reason is because I also graduated from Cal Poly, but not San Luis, Cal Poly Pomona, which is a little bit better. But nonetheless, Sure, let me ask you a question. You said 200 feet wide right away. Does it include the median island or excluding that?
That includes it. So that's property line to property line.
Okay,
At
so
the widest
all
point,
the way,
which
okay.
is actually 194, so just short of 200.
Excellent. I guess one of the focuses should be attracting tourists. Now, that sounds a little bit far-fetched at this time, but nonetheless, just imagine if people from Palmdale, Lancaster, Tehachapi come weekend here to walk in Boulevard, the area that we're talking about. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. How about the idea that widen the medium to, let's say, 30 to 40 feet wide with the good, nice landscaping and basically water fountain and walkway with some benches, like a mile. And I've seen it many, many places. In Europe, you see a lot. Other countries, you also see it. And that really attracts people. Just with that simple issue. Just walkway, fountain, water, and some nice trees and landscaping. Kids love it. People love it. They come, 20 miles just to walk. And of course, with that, stores on both sides. And that's just one idea. And could be much more better idea than I just mentioned. So this is a great proposal. The other thing is that if you get a proposal from the Cal Poly, it's better to have it one piece, like the whole 1.5 miles at once first, and see how it works. You cannot go from beginning phase to phase, because let's say you do phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3 probably because lack of budget or other thing postpone it, and then some other people come and propose different things, which doesn't match with the phase 2. In that case, then the whole idea collapses. So it's better to have the whole idea first, and then basically they have to commit to complete the whole thing in certain period of time. Thank you.
Agree with you. But we could get the whole design and just have different phases of construction,
Absolutely.
where the builders have to
Right, like
construct the
any
way
other,
it was designed.
any other plan.
Yeah.
And that's why something like street sign design or something like that could be a very low-hanging first, hurdle to clear. Get that branding out there.
Right.
Go from there.
Okay, anybody else from the public? Anybody up at the dais want to say anything?
I think we said it all pretty
Okay.
much, but,
I just got to give you the
I
opportunity.
think the gentleman's idea is very, plan the whole thing and then do it in pieces. So rather than do it hodgepodge where one thing here and another thing there, and try to have some kind of continuity.
Agree. Anybody else?
Something to bring people out of their houses and bring them into town, whether it's for a coffee, going to have a slice of pizza, where they can sit at a point in town, they get a piece, they can sit in the shade somewhere, they got a bench to sit. Here we get way too much sun. There's no place you walk through town to just hang out, sit for a minute, because you're cooking. You got to move on. Just someplace to get the people out of their houses and something to attract them to come in town, ride their bikes, do whatever they're going to do, but put them in town. Something worth coming into the town for. And we don't have none of that. And for us to expand and this to be a half-decent place to live, we need something to attract people on our street. We're going right down the alley.
Jay?
We have 5 months until January, so January would be the first point of when we can move forward with Cal Poly or CLA. So within that 5 months, can we set up a team as you described in the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we're working on next?
Yeah. We're sold on this, so we want to move
Okay.
tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. I wanted to do this
Actually,
yesterday.
Ridgecrest did a really good job on their main thoroughfare too. They put some statuettes up there and some other stuff in the median.
That was me.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. you
No,
did
it's really good
excellent
stuff.
And unfortunately, what happened was Caltrans decided they were going to make it a raised median. So, because it was just a two-way turnpike at the entire length. And we asked if the community could participate. So we actually had a number of meetings with the Planning Commission deciding, what do you want to put out there? And there was one group who thought we should have various monuments, but what ruled the day was this love of the petroglyphs, which there are some on base actually out there, and we have Petroglyph Park. And so when Caltrans put in the stonework for those raised medians, and it's about a mile and a half the entire length, they left 18 spots where we could, and we had competition, and there are 2 or 3 artists actually made some out of metal and others made out of stone. And there are 8 petroglyph. The library even has one of a petroglyph symbol reading a book, which is kind of interesting. But there are 18 locations, and only 8 have been placed so far, and so there's room
Got it.
for more. And that'd be very exciting. Yeah.
So I'm very interested in being a part of this. Will you please include me in
Sure.
I don't know how the team is going to be set up or how we're doing that, but we need to get moving on this.
We'll nominate you to be the head chair.
Yes?
I think that at this point is where we have to have planning commission meetings every 2 weeks and no cancellations. We need to get the public in here. We need to tell them what we want to do, throw it out there, get their input. But the last time we've had a meeting was over a month ago, I think. And, you know, it just doesn't serve the community.
I have a question. The foliage or the bushes in the center median, was that done with a grant? And Ann Richardson put that in?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I'll ask. It was I want to say it was a grant, but I'll have to check.
I know a lot of it was donations. Donations. Yes.
But we can explore that further. I know some public utility companies will donate shade trees, for instance. So
They did a
we'll look
really
into
good
that.
job. The only bad thing about it is I had 3 people step right out from those bushes in front of my car. You know.
The only thing I would recommend is that we advise council of what we're doing. We need their buy-in. Otherwise, it's all for naught.
Do we have any, I was going to bring this up later, but since you brought it up, do we have a time that we're meeting with them? Has that even
I don't
been
know if that's
arranged?
pushed forward or not. We were looking at some dates. All the commissioners and council members were asked to select dates. I don't know if they've done that yet.
Well,
I have.
yeah, I know all the commissioners, and we had a couple of dates where everybody was in sync. And Anna Lynn said that the biggest problem with the week you all gave consensus, I think it was over the course of 2 weeks, is that I guess one of the councilmen was on vacation in that period. So she has indicated that she's going to poll the council again and come up with a date. It looks like the best time may be a Friday, possibly a Friday morning or even a Friday afternoon, because I understand Gene does not work on Fridays. I guess
He works, it doesn't work, I think it's every other Friday, if he's on the same work schedule I'm thinking of.
But I think he told me he's off every Friday.
Oh, okay. So he's doing 4 10s
Days
then.
work for me.
Okay. All right. Put that one to bed. So keep it up and give us updates as often as you can. I kind of agree with Commissioner Macedonia in that we need to meet more frequently, especially with just discussion items. As long as there's updates to be given, I think we should probably discuss and let the public know what's going on too. Because that's the only way they're going to hear this stuff. I don't think everybody is clicking on, even if we update the website, city's website, I don't think they're going to catch everything that we're doing. Okay, so PM5, discussion of possible code amendment, re-asphalt / concrete pavement requirement.
Yes. This, wanted to bring to your attention that we had a couple of site plan reviews. One was at Till Farms, where they requested some relaxation of our current ordinance requirement, along with Sunton. They also had a site plan review approved a couple of weeks ago. Right now, municipal code requires that driveways and parking lots be either concrete or asphalt. Oh, that,
We gave him a
Yeah.
temporary waiver, which is not a permanent. We gave him, I believe we gave him a temporary waiver for that.
For the second phase.
Yeah.
I talked with a representative from East Kern Air Pollution Control District today,
Mm-hmm.
and they would consider DG as a suppressant, a dust suppressant. I said, well, what does that mean? Well, it means compared to dirt, it's better. But I was talking with
There's
AJ.
less fugitive dust from DG when it's
But-
compacted properly.
Correct. But I was also told that if you have a goodly amount of traffic, it's not going to
It
be
gets
long before.
tore up.
And a lot depends on how much you put down in the first place. And then like a UPS truck or something would just tear it all up fairly quickly. So, so we're bringing to your attention that if we are to amend that, it's going to be an amendment to the municipal code. We could dovetail that on the one that's coming up to the council on the number of general plan amendments a year. But first, there has to be a will to do it. And so I said to the air quality control person, I said, okay, if you were king of the world, what would you do in California City, private parking lots? And for whatever it's worth, he realized he's not king of the world, but his response was, he said, well, he would recommend we stick with the concrete and asphalt, because DG is not, particularly for an area that has large volume, is not the ideal surface for dust control.
Any questions from commissioners or comments?
But I think a big thing on going that direction, where we have these facilities, large facilities with low numbers, that we can get away from having massive parking lots because of the footage of the businesses where that's tied to. So it creates, like the business, what we were doing, the one meeting I sat in, without the DG, that doesn't happen. I mean, with the amount of drainage that's required when you have so much parking, it's like there's no different alternative somewhere between the DG and the things where we can get some slack where the runoff and all that has to correlate with all the parking. I don't know. I'm not to kind of help some of these businesses not have to have a 50 lot for their employees when they've got 10 people. They've got 20 acres, but they've got to put in 50, 60, whatever the number is, and for 10 employees. I mean, I need for me, some guidance here where we can try to meet somewhere to go, because if we stay with your, Lord, to say stay with the concrete, or that doesn't really help us with the dust.
Well, Sean is just saying, what about, you can do cinder blocks? I know some places they call it grasscrete, where you actually have, it'll hold the weight of a car in a parking area. But
Kind
I
of like
don't-
pavers?
Yeah, I don't think that's any less expensive, frankly, than
Back east where I'm from, they have them. You've seen them.
Yeah.
They have driveways with paving stones, grass growing up between them.
You had something like that with DG then instead of grass, so holds it together. You're just thinking outside the box.
I think it's all about the expense, though. They're not looking for beautification, they're looking to minimize their cost.
Yeah, and specifically in Suntan's case, they didn't want to have to redo the entire grading plan, because if they were to pave that part of the area, their engineer said they would have to redo their whole paving plan, because that's now not
Their
permeable, that's now
irrigation and their
runoff, and they would have to expand
runoff with all
the drainage. and
Right. But the,
would
That
just
was that. It wasn't really a cost issue, it was more of a permeability issue.
It would have blew up the whole permit.
right. But so we have to get, if we want to go with the DG or other than concrete and asphalt, we have to change the rules.
But then on what you just said, though, when we go with the DG, after a short, time frame, it
Yeah,
gets crushed
sure.
and it's just
And that's what's
dust.
going to happen.
I have a question. Would this be a blanket change? So that would mean it covers everybody, anyone down Cal City Boulevard, anyone down Aurelia? Is this
It's
all of
citywide.
California City?
It's citywide. This would be a citywide ordinance.
Okay.
This would be a change to the ordinance.
Well, I just wonder if if there was a way that you can fit it to where it makes sense. Well, and so where it makes sense. I mean, if you have something way out in the boonies that no one's gonna ever look at, but if you have something specifically on Cal City Boulevard that you're gonna be looking at, and we have the traffic and the dust.
I disagree. And the only reason I disagree is the fact, and we did give, that one place, we gave them a waiver until phase 2 to allow DG, but I guarantee you, within 3 months, it's gonna be tore up. And, did we put anything there about them having to continually compact it? Or did we just say, go ahead and lay it down? I don't know what we put down there, but my way of thinking is this. The ordinance says asphaltcrete, leave it. If a car's gonna be on it, it needs to be hard. If there's no parking anywhere else, it can be gravel, as far as I'm concerned. And that's permeable, but anywhere that a vehicle is gonna be driven on, driveways, parking lots, I agree with asphalt or concrete.
Yeah.
Your choice. Asphalt's cheaper, but.
Well,
So are you recommending to amend to allow DG for parking spaces?
No.
Or, okay,
No, we would consider it as a temporary measure.
gotcha.
I mean, that's what I would recommend. That's my train of thought. I don't know what the rest of the commission is, what their train of thought is, but my train of thought is, I'll give them a temporary waiver for up to 18 months, and that's it.
What-
And I think we have that ability. We did it with the gun shop
And-
on a CUP.
and
I see, we could do it, I agree, we could do it on a CUP for an 18-month process, period, and at the end of that time, he either gets rid of it all, or he creates it, or asphalts it.
I agree with Jim. You gotta have something that's gonna last.
Here's the other thing. If you allow gravel, which was one of the things here, I think it was, consider your handicapped people.
Well, that would actually be,
w-
you have to, per state law, pave handicap spaces. If you've been to the VFW, you can see where they actually do have a grandfathered in parking lot that's all gravel, but the
Yeah.
handicap.
There's no gravel there anymore.
Well, dirt, yeah. The handicap is cement.
No, but, yeah, if, you gotta consider the handicapped people. I mean, it's like a real thin tire wheelchair is not gonna do well in DG or gravel. So, that's why I think we need to leave it the way it is. That's my opinion, but,
and
That's my opinion also. Gravel or mud.
And I think to the point sometime, we bailed them out. I truly believe we bailed them out because when they drafted it and they did all their design, the numbers weren't right, So moving forward, to some point, like, we stay with what we have And, somewhere down the line, they can't expect the bailout. I mean, there was, the whole thing, right from the get-go, kind of put you behind a 8 ball. You shut this whole thing down to go back, and you set a guy that's gone through a process for 2 years or whatever, for an extended amount of time, and you send them way back to the back of the list. We bailed them out to some extent. And hopefully, we learned, and these people will learn that at some point we can't keep, not doing it all the time, because then everybody will expect it. Then nobody will be doing their driveways. You'll see all dirt roads, all the same thing. So I get why we did what we did, because they had the plans, everything designed in with the short term there, but I don't see us trying to stay with that down the road.
Other questions right now? You're up.
Good evening again, DJ Tuhig. I was in the meeting with Sunton. They are my client. And I made representations to the planning director requesting the amendment to DG. You were there.
But I'm sorry. And on the same note, though, with the driveways and stuff, I think there's some consideration we could make, though, with the amount of parking spaces that we have to require for specific buildings.
Took the words out of my mouth.
I mean, not changing our groundwork, but the numbers, like I said, these ain't 100-person facilities. We can give back some with the parking places, not requiring them to have, the type of business kind of more correlate to what they're going to do. You got automation now where, somebody's in a 20,000 square foot building, there's 2 people working.
Ron, I'm just going to sit down because you're saying everything I was going to say.
Oh, God, I don't
You're on
want
a
to do
roll. It's true.
that. I can't keep up with you.
I'd like to hear from you.
The automation today and the computerization is different than when these ordinances were written 150 years ago. Today we have automation, and the automation in these cannabis facilities is significant. And so we don't need as many people for these facilities. Correct me if I'm wrong, it was, I think, 47 parking spaces for Sunton, and they only need 15.
Then why are they being required to build a parking lot for 47 spaces?
Because that's the code.
That doesn't make sense. If you only have 10 or 20 employees, you should only have
That's
plus
what-
your employees plus a couple more.
That's what we heard. Richard was there also. Commissioner Richard and Ron were also there, and they were saying we don't need that many spaces.
Well,
And
they also said that they were going to bus a lot of their
Yeah.
employees.
Now, for
And
example, in the
you
trimming-
can't design a code around the assumption that the employer is going to bus his people.
But that
because-
was for the trimming season. That's not for the always.
So yeah, that would be an out of cycle type
And
thing.
the problem we ran into, I think, was with the number of parking places, and which dictated how much concrete or tar that you're going to have. That also dictated what the runoff spot in that place. So that created
It's the
now
non-permeable.
we got 50 cars parking spots. So now we have to upgrade the whole system with the drain off when they could have done. And I can agree, just stay with the concrete, but let's work on something with the parking issue so that the drain off and all that don't have to be to big extents. I mean, you got it 10 times what you would need, and you've got all them empty spots.
Well,
But you have to have it because of the way our codes are written.
But
So it's a catch-22 a little bit.
there's 2 issues, and one thing that always concerns me is if there's a facility that's being proposed today as cannabis, as a grow house or whatever, yeah, you wouldn't expect the normal kind of parking requirements that you'd have if you had an assembly line, okay? But
Correct.
what always concerns me is what happens in a year or two. The building's built, you got a 20,000 square foot building, and all of a sudden it's no longer a cannabis grow facility. It becomes something else where you do
Then
have.
they would be coming to you for a new project, and you require them to increase the size of their parking lot.
Yeah, but in some
But,
cases,
Mike,
there's no room to increase. I mean, they.
Well, no,
they have it
there's
right up.
plenty of room to increase, because you've just reduced the size of a parking lot who required the 47 spots? The city engineer? Or was your engineer?
It was in, we weren't associated with the engineer. It was in the conditions of approval.
We picked it
So
up.
you guys
No,
put it, or was it Barrigan?
It's
No.
reference to the code.
Kind of with the square footage, it was
It's the
something to
code.
do with
It's
the,
the antiquated code.
No, it's not antiquated. The parking requirements were specific to cannabis, and they were developed by our building official, and he got them from the city of Adelanto.
Okay, so is he basing it off of square footage of the facility?
I can just say that, it's,
I can get you those standards right now.
yeah.
They're
but see,
printed out.
that's,
But I mean, these aren't an antiquated code. They're something we're brought up to
Okay,
date
okay,
with
then
the
we're not going to argue
cannabis.
the date the code was written, but,
Same building official made the suggestion of the DG.
no, I'm not going to buy the DG.
no, I-
Anyway, so you've got an area of parking, okay? Just let me throw this out there. Say, it's not a bad example, but that's a business with a lot of
Foot
traffic.
traffic.
in
lot
and
of, lot of foot.
No, I was thinking about it. Yeah, but you got customers.
You
In
got
a grow facility, you don't have customers. You don't have people walking in off the street looking to buy a package.
It's illegal.
Okay, not legally anyway. I agree. But my point is, okay, say like you have a parking area that's been determined or required to be, say the 47 parking spots, of which at least one of them has to be, according to this, one every 50.
Handicap.
The feds are even more strict than that. To be a handicap. So you've got 46 spots, and you've only got 15 employees. Okay, say at the height of harvesting, you've got another 15 employees, that's 30. Why 47? You know, I mean, reduce the size of your parking lot. You can't reduce the size of the space. It's going to be 9 by 19.
We can't do the smaller compact.
You are allowed to, but there's a limit.
Right, 30% is what I read.
Yeah, 30% of the total required
Can
parking
that be
spaces.
expanded, do you know?
Beg pardon?
Can that be increased by chance?
That I don't know. That's part of, that would have to be, the Muni code would have to be changed for that.
Because more cars today are electric, more cars are smaller
Yeah,
today.
you haven't seen my truck.
I was going to say,
I
every
just-
time-
I take,
every time
when I
go to
want to, I
park-
take 4 spaces.
There's room for you too.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Because, yeah, it was one space per 1,000 square foot, and that was,
Right.
Warehouse
so
distribution
that
area.
had three different phases, that
And
building.
what
they
I
were looking at.
found interesting is, so we asked the applicant, why in the world, how could you miss, I think there were less than half the parking spaces they needed.
19.
Yeah, and they said, well, our engineer didn't calculate because the plan, that the building and the parking was actually designed by our architect. So all of
Okay.
a sudden, the engineer's off the hook because the architect designed the building and the plan. Seems to me that whomever submits the plan has to be responsible and accountable to the city code.
Okay, and Mr. Berrigan got this from Atlanta?
Yes.
Okay, the first part really bothers me. 1 space per 1,000 square foot for the first 20,000 square feet. So that's 20 spaces right there for a 20,000 square foot grow. Okay? 1 space per 2,000 square foot for that portion between 20 and 40. And 1 space per 4,000 square foot over 40,000. But for manufacturing and other industrial uses, 1 parking space for each employee during the shift of maximum employment. That makes more sense.
Correct?
Per employee.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then 1 parking space for each vehicle used in conjunction with the use. Yeah, I agree with that. You got to have, if you got company trucks, you got to do that. And then, yeah,
The thing that's screaming at me is the word greenhouse. Adelanto had power.
Well,
We have greenhouses. So greenhouses are not the same as an indoor warehouse. We just have to really consider how can we accommodate greenhouses that are cultivation based. They're not manufacturing greenhouses. They're cultivation greenhouses with a lot of innovation, hydroponics, etc. We're not going to need that much parking.
well, because this looks like it's, what our first one is, would be something like when you go up into Tehachapi and you got the outdoor farms and they've got massive amounts of people out there working. That fits that. But, yeah, maybe
Park
we
in the
need to
field.
break
What
this
if,
down to.
what if it changes from cannabis
A greenhouse?
to, no, whatever, the property they're talking about?
If it changes from cannabis to some other industry,
Yeah,
then you
that
just
has a lot of traffic.
you
That's why
just
I'm
require them to make a
emphasizing
bigger parking lot.
greenhouse.
Because it has to come back through the city.
Yeah, my thought is, I don't know what else you can put into a greenhouse besides agricultural. I just don't know of anything else you can do in a
What
greenhouse.
if the greenhouse is taken down because they made so much money, they decided to sell the property and move on?
That would be a different
And-
application.
But still, it's gonna be parking. There's gonna be parking for
Yeah,
something
we're
there.
getting way off
Even if
track
it's a
here.
restaurant. No,
No,
yeah,
I-
that's the thing, it's getting too far out.
Because if a business changes changes from one type of business to another, they're going to have to come through the city with an application. Then the city is going to evaluate their parking their parking plan and everything else.
Safety,
And they're going to say,
etc.
okay, now you're a restaurant and you're seating 150 people a night. Yeah, you're going to need 75 to 90 parking spaces. So, I mean, the city will dictate what should be, but I disagree with going for the first part of this. And somebody else chime in if they disagree with me. I don't
No,
care.
I-
I think that we should go just for the manufacturing. One parking space for each employee during the shift of maximum employment. If you have 15 regular employees and then you bring in another 15 employees for harvesting, that's 30. So you should have 30 spaces, not 47. And one of them needs to be handicapped. And if you do, you can actually do, I don't know if do they do van pool parking around here? Anywhere?
Question.
Van pool parking is a lot like handicap parking. It just gives you a place up front, and it's a little bit wider to accommodate a van. You got an opening for the van. I would consider van pool parking too. If a company has already decided they want to do van pools, sure, let them. That cuts down on air pollution and vehicular traffic.
Well, that's what that guy said. He was going to bus in
Yeah.
on cultivation time. They would.
We actually have a 22-passenger bus allocated.
That's going to take a lot larger spot.
What's the
pretty
prison
tight.
got out there?
Hmm?
What's the prison got out there for parking?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure they have employees for shift employees on shift plus visitors. They got to have visitor parking. So, but I
This is where we have to work on.
Retention
do need to
basins
work
are
on
the
it.
greatest
This
greatest
would be the
cost.
point of-
Dealing with the change in retention basins, the oversized retention basin, it's going to have an effect on the pro formas. Those effects on pro formas are going to affect the general tax. So it is all integrated, as Ron was saying. If we're going to continue to do this, it's going to increase the size of the retention basins, which are already too big, by the way. And then you have all this extra non-permeable surface. It's going to make those retention basins bigger than the facilities. So it's an important issue to have a reasonable number, maybe an assertive number for greenhouse cultivation.
does this need to be adopted by the city?
It never
Or,
was. I mean, the
or is
second
it just
part is
adopted by the building official and just taken as law?
exactly yes and no. I mean, the first part was
That's
it
what I
has
would
not
say.
been part of the code, but the second part you see it's section 9-2. Yeah, that's part of the code right now.
Thank you.
No, it's our code.
Okay.
Yeah, seems like
So,
the manufacturing would fit
if-
both needs.
9-2.208B19 is in our Muni code?
Yes, sir.
I'll have to.
We shouldn't even be having this discussion. That's the only one legally we can go with. They can challenge that legally.
Sure.
Because this is just taken from somebody else's requirement, which we have, as a city, have not adopted.
Correct.
You
Which
mean
is
the
vague
warehouse.
to the applicant.
We have, yes, the warehouse distribution and indoor agriculture.
We had manufacturing, is that what's on the books, the manufacturing?
Manufacturing and other industrial uses. Duh.
So where did we
It
get,
includes indoor grow,
where did we get the other,
Atalanta.
that somebody got?
Mr. Berrigan adopted
Somebody
it.
picked that up somewhere and that's what they kind of, we went with?
Mr. Berrigan picked it up from Atalanta.
I
Yeah,
believe he supported the waiver. If you remember, he was sitting in the meeting briefly when I made that recommendation. So he supported the waiver, right? And then you
Right.
referred in your conditions of approval back to the code. But on that moment, you allowed them to proceed subject to city attorney approval.
Yeah, because it really doesn't matter how the building official feels.
Right.
They
No.
wanted to get
It's a
legal
recommendation,
opinion.
per
Yes,
se.
right.
Okay, so since this is discussion, and we can all speak in again as soon as I'm done, my recommendation is that they submit a parking plan based on what's in our Muni code.
An addendum or something.
No, I don't see where it needs to be an addendum. I see your parking
got an
plan should be,
approval.
should be in compliance with that section of the Muni code, period.
Somewhere we want to make sure everybody's following the same direction here.
There's direction,
Wherever people got the information.
there's direction that the city has not approved.
So we need to get somewhere.
Just a
Until
point
then-
of, point of clarification. So for Suntan, do I need to get a parking plan to you to fulfill their requirements?
Yeah, and if it meets section, the section part, then
Okay.
you're good. If
Do you want this?
I have it.
Okay.
And what type of credentials are going to be required for that parking plan? A planner?
Oh, no,
Yes, sir.
hang on
well,
a second.
it's going to have to be,
It has to be approved by the city, oh, no, just entrances and exits have to be approved by the city engineer.
Okay, so it's
So-
not per se an engineer, it could be a planner.
Correct.
Okay. And really, thank you each for your diligence on this matter.
Okay.
I mean, bear in mind, the staff does not want to insist that people have more parking than they need.
Oh, I understand,
no.
I understand. I understand,
but
it's just,
you-
they adopted, something was adopted that the city has not approved.
Right.
And I don't think that's right.
And somewhere somebody's following a different guideline.
The compact. Oh, the compact car, that's gonna stay the same. 30% is allowed of the total required spaces.
Yeah, okay, here.
And they're 7.5 by 15.
Okay. Uh,
Anybody else want to speak on this before we put it to bed?
Well, before you put it to bed, there is one thought. And this is Sean came up with this idea. Maybe we should look at DG for manufacturing, but not necessarily commercial, because I think everybody agrees we don't necessarily want the restaurant or the heavy use commercial public parking areas to be DG. So
Manufacturing still has vehicular traffic, so no, I disagree.
Okay.
I don't care. If a vehicle's going to travel on it in a business, it needs to be asphalt
So
or concrete.
I guess
Okay.
the last thing I would say is I agreed absolutely with the travel lanes between the parking spaces. But the parking spaces themselves where the cars park on, so maybe the lanes are paved, that could possibly be
Okay,
a permeable solution or something.
striping DG, first time it rains, you have no striping. And as a vehicle turns on DG, it digs into the ground. And now you've got fugitive dust. So I'm still opposed to DG.
I'm with Jim here, where we correct this, the tar, concrete, for me, that's, now that we bring everything down and we're more in tune with what the type of business, I don't think we need to go to any kind of, other than the concrete. I think
But-
we need to stay with that direction.
But I think as a commission, we'll still consider a CUP for a temporary waiver. It's not in writing, but we just did it for Jones, so. So if we've done it for one, can you do a CUP in conjunction with the project?
You can, but they don't have to.
Okay.
I mean, most of them are coming through as site plans.
But yeah, I would give 12 to 18 months max. That would be an attorney thing, which I'm not. I didn't go to school that far.
Talking about suntan? As soon as the attorney gives his blessing, we're happy. I mean,
So,
we want to get these projects up and running. That's our objective.
As long as the attorney doesn't poo-poo it, it's good.
Right.
Are you comfortable with that?
so
Are you looking at me? If we can do a temp, I mean, I hope I speak for everybody, but if we can do a temporary waiver, not to exceed 18 months, then they're obligated to put down asphalt.
But take a look at the new numbers now, DJ. We may
Yeah, I'm
be-
sure that,
Maybe a moot.
yeah, they gotta have a
Let's see.
parking plan. That's a given.
Yeah.
That's a given. Whether, whatever surface it would be on, it still has to be a parking plan. But it's, it's really hard to stripe DG and keep it that way unless you use fire hose. We used to line baseball fields with fire hose. It will be an issue. It definitely will, because you got to keep it compacted, and you don't need code enforcement going out every 5 minutes checking one building, so. Okay, PM6. Guess we didn't need to see that. That was their part, that was, it's not in here. We don't have it. We're not that privileged.
Yeah, that was Rick Jones's project.
Yeah, it is.
No, this one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, on to PM6. This is just an update of.
Yeah, so
Planning
there's a-
projects, just an update.
Yeah, not too much to update on, except that we're moving forward. We are receiving. So last week I received 8 new site plans.
Wow.
Yeah, formally, but a few more conceptually that they look over and give comments on, and goes, kind of goes back and forth. But the main point is that we're getting things moving along in the correct manner. We're seeing a lot more grading permits being issued.
People are starting to do things the right way?
Correct.
Thank you. Commissioners, have any questions about PM6? Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, don't worry about it.
I'd like to have everybody go first. You have a first and then a second and a third condition of approval. Do you have a max on how many conditions of approval you have, or?
We don't really have that many conditions of approval. We now only have one condition of approval, and then if they don't like it, they can appeal those conditions to you. However, in the past, the engineers have been used as a plan check, and that's where these conditions have been coming back and forth. So people would satisfy those conditions by applying them or reapplying to the engineer, but we have taken over that duty, so we now get engineering conditions one time from engineering, public works, fire, and building. Those are then put together in the conditions of approval. We then have a director's hearing that's publicly noticed for 72 hours, and then those are adopted. Those are the conditions, just one time,
Okay.
that they need to meet to get their certificate of occupancy.
Thank you. I have one more question too. This just kind of popped in my head. What's that?
No, he asked what I was thinking. I said, no, I'm just paying attention.
Okay. I have one more question that I was thinking about, and might as well just throw it out there. In the past, we were outsourcing our negative declarations. So are you guys now doing them in-house? Or are you still outsourcing? Yeah, you're the ones doing them?
I mean, occasionally, if it's complicated, even if it's neg deck, we'll go to our consultant, the gentleman that was here tonight, and get a second opinion.
Okay. And that consulting firm that was here, we've contracted them?
Yes.
Okay. And that's what they do? They work on CEQA and,
Exactly. And they're gonna help us out with the airport rezoning.
okay, very good. Thank you.
And,
Just curious.
and yeah, just for some local development news, we have Primo Burger looking at a possible restaurant here at the old Napa location next to the
Seriously? Cool.
Fast Stop. The owner of Primo Burger actually owns that building,
Right.
and so he's allowing one of his employees to then open up a shop there. So
Interesting.
additionally, we
I
have
like Primo. They got some massive food.
yeah,
They
The
give you more than
burritos.
you can possibly eat.
What else we got going on?
so we have a Southern cooking restaurant that's been approved. These are all existing buildings, so they kind of, mini SDRs. We just
Right.
check their zoning and they go into building.
Where's that gonna be at?
So that's right next to Raj's Bistro
Okay.
there, Emerald Bistro. And then, as you have seen and heard, Alberto's is now open,
Yes.
I haven't tried it yet.
and they're very, very busy. If you know any good experienced cooks, they need them ASAP. So.
Already heard
I think
some
they were
complaints
over
about
as
that
as I
place.
told their project manager when they're open, or their store manager. I said you're going to be inundated with business, and I don't know if she didn't realize that, but right.
Hopefully
If
they're
they have
open late
churros.
night.
So, and
They're
then-
pretty high
and then-
priced.
I think we knew
yeah,
that going in.
unfortunately, that was kind of disappointing to see. But and then finally, Jerry Heller's coffee shop and drive-through dairy, he submitted his site plan. So
I understand he's trying to break ground by August 1st.
I don't
Oh,
think
wow.
That's not
gonna
gonna happen, huh?
But
No.
Oh.
I mean, who knows?
That's,
The plans are out for
Jerry's-
review right now.
Okay.
So I'm waiting to hear
Just,
back.
he's a hustler. He gets it after
thank
it.
you.
He gets after it.
Anybody have any other
I have
questions about PM6? But I'm going to get to the next subject in a second. All right. Commissioner items and comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for planning commissioners to present information, announcements, and items that have come to their attention. Short staff responses may be appropriate. The planning commission will take no formal action. A planning commissioner may request to calendar an item for consideration at a future meeting or refer an item to staff. Commissioner Trumbull.
I
Now's your
have
chance.
another complaint about the dog park. I've watched it a couple of times, and people go in there with their dogs, and they sit there on that bench, and they let that dog poop everywhere. They got sack bags there to put the poop in, but they're not cleaning up after their dogs. And I don't know how we can. You can't sit there and watch people and cite them if they don't pick up their dog poop. But I don't know how we can get these people to it's a nice dog park, and they should. I watched some old man. He had 2 dogs, and the dogs just pooped everywhere, and he never did get off that bench until it was time to take the dogs home.
And there are signs in there that say, please clean them after your dogs?
They've got the sack, the bags there, dispensary for you to do that.
Yeah, but no other signage other than that? Anyway, I'll take a look.
I'll forward this on to Brenda, our Parks and Rec director.
Who's going to put it on code enforcement, probably?
Oh, God.
I'll also alert them.
They fixed the water thing there.
Oh, finally, huh?
Yeah.
Good deal.
So that's my complaint. I don't know if you knew Tom, I can't think of his last name. He had a little scooter, he had a little Chihuahua. He went with him, and he passed away. And
Tom or the Chihuahua? Tom or the Chihuahua?
Tom did.
Okay. I
and-
wasn't trying to be funny. I
Oh,
didn't know.
yeah. And my wife and I have been walking the dog, the Chihuahua.
Oh.
And, so we walk him from their house all the way up to the dog park, and let him run around in the dog park. And, but it's a nice dog park, and yeah, they keep it clean.
Commissioner Macedonia, anything? Commissioner Hogan?
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Elms? Amazing.
I know, right?
I got a couple of things. Staff, I'm really impressed with everything you're doing here with the presentations that we have. And also, DJ, I want to apologize for my actions. I was a little bit out of line. And we'll talk offline a little bit more later. Okay? All right. With that, I would like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. We're out, folks.
All right. We need to sign
Oh,
the
yeah.
paper.
He's got it. It's required by state.
I know. It's fine.
Like if it was a, Don wants to go home, he needs another nap.
You need to get paid too, so.
I didn't know we had a tribe here that was in this area.
We don't, he does, they do the research, they find out what tribes might have been in the area, and they send out the project information to them. Basically, that's all it is, really. I mean, it should be just administrative,